Hello, I'm Bill Woods. Welcome to round 8 of the Formula One World Championship, continuing an amazing night of motorsport here on Network 10. We are halfway through the Formula One season. It's pretty hard to believe, really, as we welcome Neil Crompton to preview this race at the Gilles Villeneuve circuit in Montreal. 5 different winners so far, Neil. It's a little bit surprising, I guess, given the climate in which we entered this championship, and it's been pretty good.
But it's fantastic news, isn't it? Top of the morning to you, by the way, Billy. But terrific season so far. There's been lots to talk about, very close racing, some great strategy battles, and the last race in particular at Monaco wasn't necessarily spectacular, but again, it was a great pressure motor race, and we've seen great variety in 2003, and that's fantastic for all of us.
Yeah, good breakthrough there for Juan Montoya at Monaco. We'll have a look at that a little more closely in a moment, but firstly, let's refresh your memory of the championship points going into this round at Montreal. Here's Monaco, and it was a wonderful, traditional circuit, and a very important one for Montoya to break through in.
Yes, and talking of Montoya here, the significant thing about the start of that race, Billy, was the fact that he was able to jump the McLaren off the line, and that certainly had a big impact on the way the afternoon was going to unfold. Frentzen, a very experienced driver, made a mistake in the chicane on the opening lap, which was a bit of a surprise to all and sundry. Great shots here from the Renault, just demonstrating the undulations of this circuit, how tight it is. You cannot make a mistake. The pace of the things through the tunnel is really quite extraordinary. But as I said just before, tremendously tight motor race in terms of strategy, determined in the end by really the middle segment from Montoya, who did an unbelievable job. Alonso was on the pace once again, demonstrating his incredible talents, coming to terms with what is obviously a very difficult circuit. Mark Webber, a tough day. Reliability for the Jaguars was an issue. Middle of the race also quite impressive, particularly towards the end of the fuel loads with the Ferraris, but Bridgestone really struggled at this event. But this man was the guy to watch. Montoya was unbelievably strong. He was able to ultimately control the event, and the significant thing for him was the way in which he put the pace on in that middle segment of the race. And here is the point situation after the 7th round. It's a 4-point margin between Raikkonen, then Schumacher, Alonso back up to 3rd, Barrichello 4th, Montoya jumps up another 10 points into 5th, then Coulthard, Schumacher, Ralph and Trulli in 8th position. Here's the constructors, just 2 points in it. It's been seesawing all year between McLaren, Mercedes and Ferrari. Williams, BMW now well in the game, Renault 42, Jordan Ford, BAR, Sauber and Jaguar in 8th.
And Schumacher deciding to stick with Ferrari. That was the big news we talked about the last time round, and it's been confirmed a little sooner than we thought.
Yes, and the extension of the contract through until the end of 2006, they're saying. And it's not only just about Michael, also the key group of people that support him, Rory Byrne, who's the chief designer, Jean Todt, who's the team manager, and Ross Brawn, who's the technical director, are staying there as well. There's been a bit of talk and speculation in the past few days since that announcement about whether he will or whether he won't, and I guess it is exactly that, it's just speculation. But that's a long time, and when you look in these record books at the sorts of numbers that Michael has achieved so far in his Formula One career, the mind boggles what he might be able to do in the next 3 years. And I suspect that, like some people, for example, Eddie Jordan has suggested that there could well be an exit clause in there if he feels as though he's had enough one morning or things are not going the way he wants to. We may not see that whole period served, but nonetheless, he's going to be here for a while, and that's going to be a real pest for everybody else in the paddock.
Well, in particular, the immediate pest factor is Rubens Barrichello. I mean, he's the only one who didn't sign up to that long-term deal among the top names in the team, and it just brings those haunting words of Eddie Irvine back, doesn't it, that being Michael's teammates like being hit over the head with a baseball bat or a cricket bat, I think it was.
Well, yeah, it's a difficult position to be in, obviously, and the thing that you really can't do is the Ferrari number 2 is go into business for yourself, and invariably when you do, then the pressure comes on pretty hard and strong. But look, I don't know what they'll do in terms of their second driver at the moment. They don't need to make a rushed decision on that one. For the time being, Rubens has sort of fallen into line precisely as they'd want. There's been a couple of hiccups along the way, but time will tell on that one. But one thing's for sure, Ferrari are going to remain competitive. And this race tonight, it'll be a very interesting one to see how they run on their Bridgestone tyres, which have struggled. There's been no dry weather running at all so far. It's been unbelievably wet up there, other than for the first 2 hours of the Friday practice session at the beginning of the day. And this could be the event where the tables turn a little bit. McLaren are buried in the grid. Ferrari could get on top here.
Shuey has a good record here, though, and he is quietly confident with the way they've set up the car. But we'll elaborate on that a little later as we look firstly at where we're going. We say Montreal, we say Canada. In fact, it's very close, of course, to the United States border. Neil, you spent a bit of time in this area. It's quite a circuit as well.
Yeah, it's just to the northeast slightly of the American Midwest area, and the weather can be pretty fickle up there, and we just talked about that a moment ago, although they're forecasting partly cloudy and 65 degrees today, around about 21 in our language. Humidity is 70%. There's a fair old breeze blowing there at the moment, and this, in fact, was the site, Billy, for the 67 World Fair and also the Olympic Games in 1976. It was named after Gilles Villeneuve in 78, which was the first time this particular track hosted the event. One Pablo Montoya's got both the lap record, and he was on pole last year. He was in the 12s last year. They haven't achieved those sorts of numbers this year. But again, obviously, with only a couple of hours of dry weather running for 4 teams on Friday morning, and then the rest of the time it's been wet. It's interesting that in the wet phase of qualifying and practice, the Ferraris, and in particular Bridgestone, looked good. As soon as it dried out for real qualifying on the Saturday afternoon, Michelin absolutely dominated, and obviously Williams have done very well.
And there's a familiarity there for Cristiano Di Marta for a change in this championship because of that crossover with the champ cars, and he's had some experience here, as has Montoya before he went to the realms of F1. But right now, let's take a look at Saturday qualifying, which was quite a turnaround, as Neil said, in terms of the weather conditions. With earlier sessions hit by rain, everyone expected quite a shuffle as conditions dried for the Saturday charge. Jacques Villeneuve was first out, thanks to a crash on Friday, but he made up some places on the grid. Jarno Trulli crashed in the warm-up but turned in a great lap in his spare car, beating Villeneuve by 0.6 of a second, a lap that would ultimately give him a 4th-row start. The next 3 drivers made some gains on their Friday positions. Fisichella improved 2 spots, Pizzoni 4, and Cristiano Di Marta, who'd crashed in morning practice, went from 16th to 9th. But no one would outdo Ralf Schumacher. The pole sitter for the previous round was running 16th in the order here. His fast warm-up times and Trulli's earlier lap indicated that Michelin tyres were a vastly different prospect in the dry.
And that is a serious benchmark for the rest.
There were 14 drivers queued up to beat him at that time, but Ralf had more than a second to play with. One of the year's great shootouts was about to unfold. Button and Wilson never went close, but the next big Michelin runner was Juan Montoya.
So here goes Montoya, walloped over the curve within a minch of the champion's wall.
Struggling Minardi were fighting in the press room and fighting on the track. Jos Verstappen, who'd produced their best session of the season on Friday, dropped only 4 places. Olivier Panis, who, like his teammate, had crashed in practice, jumped from 10th to 7th. Mark Webber, 9th on Friday, couldn't break into the 115s on Saturday, but he did improve.
A super lap by Mark Webber in the Jaguar.
In the end, it would be 3 spots better off on the 3rd row. David Coulthard's lap was disappointing, but not as bad as Kimi Raikkonen's.
Oh, Raikkonen's off the racetrack, and this is going to cost him very dearly.
Then the 2nd Renault. Alonso would move from row 3 to row 2 with that time. Furman and Heidfeld, the Friday surprises, tumbled down the order as expected. And that left the Ferraris. Michael Schumacher locked it up on the first corner and ran more of a race setup with wing settings designed for overtaking.
He's got a half a chance. Over the line he goes, and it is 3rd. He still can't make it.
Barrichello had the final shot, but he also compromised with a race setup and for the 3rd consecutive round fell short.
Has he got front row? No!
An all-Williams front row for the first time this season. Webber alongside Barrichello. Panis once again qualifies strongly. His 3rd start on row 3 this year, but he's finished only 2 races. Di Marta heads row 5, his best qualifying of the season. Coulthard continues a very uneven sequence of qualifying runs, but still ahead of the hapless Villeneuve. Verstappen sets a new benchmark for Minardi. Button had handling problems, and Raikkonen, he may even start from pit lane. He certainly doesn't want a repeat of Barcelona. We should elaborate, Neil, on this low downforce setup that Ferrari were talking about. They think it'll be better for overtaking than it was, of course, in the one-lap dash with no traffic.
Yes, and whatever Michael typically selects at this circuit over the years, both with Ferrari and with Benetton, it's proven to be very successful. In the last 10 years, Billy, he's won 5 events at Montreal. He's had pole on no less than 6 occasions. And I mentioned on RPM earlier in the day, or yesterday, I think it was now,
whenever,
scratching my head, that Michael has this incredible characteristic in his driving where, I mean, he's obviously a very late breaker, but he carries enormous speed in the braking phase all the way in the turn into the apex of the corner. And I'd say that he's probably gone for this slightly lower downforce setup just to make some more straight line speed and try and get away with the fact that he can slide the car on the rear brake a little bit into the apex.
McLaren's in a bit of strife here. As I said, Coulthard was disappointing, and Kimi Raikkonen, well, we don't know whether he'll start from pit lane or the back of the grid, but given the fact that he ran into Pitsonia in an earlier round this year, he might want to start from pit lane for what it's worth.
Well, you can see, here's the replay of the incident that trapped him. That was the first turn in qualifying, believe it or not, folks. And he was trapped, like so many of the drivers in qualifying, by patchy, wet conditions on the verges of the road. He locked the rear brakes, and then you can see that he's nailed the rear wing up against the wall, and off he goes. And pretty simple fundamental error, but a lot of people made mistakes there yesterday, Bill. It was quite surprising. Quite a few drivers had to carry flat-spotted front tyres through the rest of their qualifying lap, and you can see the rear steps out at precisely the wrong moment, which puts him offline once he gets out on the painted ripple strip, on the red and white ripple strip there, and then also, of course, on the verge of the grass. It's all over. So very frustrating for them. They're really in strife because Coulthard has qualified down the order, and obviously Kimi's going to start at the back.
In contrast, Renault and Toyota running particularly well. Mike Gascoigne did think that his cars wouldn't be so strong here because they lacked speed, but the speed's been not bad, and through the twisty bits they expect to be a little better than some of the others. Yeah,
and the significant thing here to remember is that Renault are one of 4 teams that got the benefit of the dry testing on Friday morning. Everybody else has had to guess. Now, when it comes to making very important decisions with things like rubber, wing angles and all the rest of it, it's absolute stab in the dark stuff at the moment relative to this circuit for everybody else. So they've done very well. Their top speeds, the split times and the radars were showing that they were in the mid 320 kilometres an hour, so the thing's not too lazy in a straight line. Some of the cars I might mention, though, the particularly aero-efficient cars have been in the mid 330s, which is very, very quick.
And Toyota, a much improved position as a team. D'Amata and Panis both qualifying reasonably well. Panis, of course, with pretty horrible memories of this circuit and once again crashing, but still managing to salvage a row 4 spot. We'll take a break. When we come back, we should have some pictures for you from Montreal. The drivers are suiting up, and any tick of the clock will take you to the circuit at Montreal. But in the meantime, a quick rundown on testing. Neil Crompton, there's been quite a bit, as usual, and a little bit of pressure, I guess, from BMW on Williams, which was relieved at Monaco. They finally realised now that the engine is being well treated by the chassis, so to speak.
Well, they've been certainly working at it very hard in terms of away from the race meeting testing, and immediately after Monaco all of the major teams went into a flurry of testing again. 3 days, successive days at Silverstone for many of the teams, and also across at Monza, testing not only for the forthcoming British Grand Prix and the Italian Grand Prix, but also low downforce configurations for this race, because next to Monza this track has the highest average speed, about 200 kilometres per hour. And we've now got pictures up from Canada, and looking there at Cristiano D'Amata just suiting up, and that's the hands device going on him. But just quickly, Ralf Schumacher was the fastest man. He ran all 3 days at Silverstone, Billy, and good news also there for Michelin. They continue to be strong. Interesting that both Williams and Toyota split drivers and cars across both tests, which is becoming a popular trend now as people double and redouble their efforts to search for pace. You can see an enormous crowd here. We still haven't got final confirmation as to whether or not Kimi Raikkonen is going to start from the back of the grid or pit lane, but we'll keep you posted on that one. Across at Monza immediately after Monaco, Rubens Barrichello did 1 day of the 3-day testing there and was quickest. He only had to turn up. There's De Pasquier on the left from Michelin, Pierre De Pasquier talking with Ron Dennis, who's been in the news this week because the Friday FIA media conference, Billy, was a beauty. I've got the transcript. And Paul Stoddart, the Australian who owns Minardi, and this man on the left, Ron Dennis, got stuck into it. Everybody knows that Stoddy is a bit cash-strapped.
The transcript is actually still simmering.
It is, and earlier in the year the teams pledged a fighting fund to support him. Incidentally, that McLaren you're looking at there is the 17D model for Kimi Raikkonen and also for David Coulthard. There was talk earlier in the year that the MP4 18 model would be ready for this event. That's not going to be the case this weekend. In fact, it looks like it might be delayed for some while at the moment. They have tested the car. It's shown some pace here and there, but there's still some issues to resolve with it, obviously, in terms of pace and reliability.
If they wait much longer, the 2003 car will be the 2004 car.
Yeah.
But there was quite a scrap in that news conference, and Bernie Ecclestone also played a rather intriguing role at the end of it all.
Well, yeah, there was a flurry of activity. Sir Frank Williams was involved in the media conference together with David Richards from BAR, also Eddie Jordan, who was expected to support Paul Stoddart in his bid for this fighting fund, but they all kind of left Stoddart high and dry a little bit. They didn't like the fact that he went and aired his dirty laundry in public at a media conference, and ultimately Dennis and Stoddart got stuck into each other. The net result, as you quite rightly point out, is that Bernie Ecclestone's become involved, and Mr Ecclestone, I believe, is now a part shareholder in Minardi. He's come up with some money to keep them afloat through until the end of the year, but there'll be some strategic politics behind that. It could help him in his wheeling and dealing with the Grand Prix World Championship, the GPWC, or perhaps it might either help or hinder Paul Stoddart stay in the sport. Bernie has been on the record as saying that he wants him to pee off, and there's no place in Formula One for him, so we'll wait and see with interest on that one.
So is it a case of if you can't beat them, join them, or in this case, buy into them, so that he can keep a closer eye on proceedings with Minardi, with that Paul having the power of veto?
Pretty fascinating little brawl, that one. But meanwhile, Heinz-Harald Frentzen straps up. Remember, the drivers can't do up their own belts in these Formula One cars. He'll start from position 10 with Bridgestone tyres on that car. You can see that this island, if you like, is surrounded by the Ottawa and St Lawrence rivers. And this site really comes alive. Canadian motorsport fans, Billy, are unbelievably enthusiastic. They're incredibly knowledgeable. There's been a lot of very successful Canadian race drivers, both in Champ Car and, of course, in Formula One. And the crowds turn up for both Vancouver and Toronto en masse for the Champ Car race, and certainly for this race at Montreal. A lot of Americans come across the border as well. A very important market for many of the major manufacturers, and one of the reasons, in fact, why BMW and Williams put on that little act at Indianapolis earlier in the week between Jeff Gordon, the four-time NASCAR champion, and Juan Pablo Montoya. They each did 7 laps in their respective cars, and they had a ball, and that was all part of the process to just help promote Formula One in North America. They're still trying to raise the profile of the sport in the United States.
The odd thing here is that even though it's dad's circuit for Jacques Villeneuve, he hasn't had a great record here.
No, he hasn't. And in fact, in '99, he was one of 3 world champion drivers, including Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill, to whack that wall at the final chicane. Here's Montoya, position 2, 15.9. You can see the time there on the right-hand side. He was the pole man this time last year with a 1:12. It's a low downforce setup at this circuit, Billy. It's a pretty smooth circuit, low grip, and it's particularly dirty early on in the weekend, although the rain has probably washed it clean, relatively clean at least anyway. And the characteristics of the circuit, either you're basically flat out hard on the throttle here or you're very hard on the brakes. Not a lot of lateral load in the corners. In fact, the average corner speed's pretty low. 70 laps will be the journey tonight, 305 kilometres. 75% race distance is 53 laps in case we have a weather issue.
Let's just have a...
Sorry, Billy. In terms of, I'll just quickly make a point there, in terms of the way in which strategy may unfold here, you'll see most people run a 2 or a 3-stop strategy, I imagine. For every 10 kilograms of fuel at this circuit, you'll penalise yourself about a quarter of a second, 0.25.
Well, as we look at Schumacher, both of them in fact, on the grid, a quick look at how the top 5 drivers in the championship have gone so far this season. And the consistency of Raikkonen really stands out in that group. Michael, of course, with the 3 victories. But Kimi's done exceptionally well, and had he not had that problem in round 5, then would have been leading the championship by a heck of a lot more.
It remains to be seen how he can get out of jail tonight, and that'll require some clever strategy on the part of McLaren.
And how good is Alonso going for a bloke who didn't have a drive last year?
Yes, but he did a lot of testing last year, and that's further strengthened his credentials. Here's the man with 2 pole positions on the trot, Ralf Schumacher. Failed to convert at Monaco. Can he convert tonight? Interestingly, from an Australian point of view, Billy, our own Alan Jones was the winner here in Montreal in 1979 and 1980, and Mark Webber has been quick all weekend, regardless of whether it's been wet or dry. And there's a great shot of the carbon fibre braking system on the McLaren MP417. The safety car will set off shortly to clear the circuit.
We haven't seen a lot of Mark Webber, but David Pitchforth reckons the circuit will suit his car. as we take another look at Michael.
Their big issue has been a little bit of a lack of straight-line speed. The particularly aero-efficient cars, as I said before, are up in the mid-330 km/h range in the top speed on the straight, whereas the Jags are good 10 to 15 k's slower. So in order to come up with the right combination, they're probably carrying more wing than they might like to. But they just want reliability. They've had a couple of respectable results so far this year, and they're looking to build on that. That'll be the key to their success tonight.
All right, well, we're getting set for a start in this race, and I guess, as we said, Ferrari is going to be very competitive, as they normally have, but there's a big opportunity here for people like Ralf Schumacher, who needs some points in the championship, but also, I think, would like to consolidate his position at Williams for a little while yet.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, one of the other things that's particularly interesting about this race will just be the whole guess strategy side of it. Because so few people have had an opportunity to really kind of sort their cars out, we won't know exactly how it's all going to unfold until we get to the end of the 70-odd laps. But we'll have more of the Canadian Grand Prix right after this break.
Welcome back to Montreal, where we can confirm that Kimi Raikkonen will start from pit lane, and Michael Schumacher, of course, in a very, very strong position, a lot further up the grid.
He ran a little wide just going into the first corner in qualifying yesterday, cost him a fraction of time, but it didn't look like he was going to have a response to the very rapid pace of both Williams cars. A couple of people had problems, as mentioned before, in qualifying. In fact, we had shots there before of Frentzen. They had a shunt in the morning. They had to repair his car. They also had an engine failure with that car, and he was actually probably lucky to get out of jail and end up 10th on the grid. The Renaults, as you mentioned before, Billy, have been probably a bit surprisingly competitive, and truly had to use the T-car in qualifying after a shunt in the warm-up, which precedes qualifying by only a few minutes. So they turned him around and got him in the other car, which was set up for the other driver, for Alonso, and he did a great job. And
Neil, we have to be cautious when we talk about the tyre war, don't we? I mean, you can't make race assumptions on the basis of a three-lap qualifying dash.
No.
I mean, Michelin obviously is good in the dry, there's no doubt about it, but how they last over race distance...
And if you look at that sky in the background there at the moment, Billy, there's a little bit more blue around than yesterday, and it doesn't take much variance in UV or temperature to alter the tyre characteristics, because they all run very fine tolerances on these tyres that are on Formula One cars.
Just recapping the points here. A delicate situation indeed for Raikkonen when you're starting from pit lane and defending a 4-point championship lead.
It was also the first time this weekend after the new rule was introduced where we actually got to see the full monsoon wets in action. And based on yesterday morning's form and late Friday afternoon form, you have to say that the Bridgestone heavy wet was the tyre to have. But I don't think we're going to have a situation where we see them today, quite thankfully. So it appears as though we're going to get a dry race. And Mark Webber gave me some information earlier in the day, and he suggested that because of the lack of running from a number of the teams, in particular the Michelin teams, many of them have chosen the slightly harder option that was available to them. Michelin have got 4 different tyre options available this weekend, 2 compound variants and 2 construction variants, where Bridgestone have been concentrating on creating a tyre that dissipates heat efficiently because of the heat build-up, because of the high straight line speeds here. There's Raikkonen, so confirmation that he will start from pit lane, and we'll take you across shortly to the ITV commentary with Martin Brundle and James Allen. And so that has afforded McLaren the opportunity now to change some of the settings on this car, reconfigure it according to what might be a more appropriate strategy to try and get them out of jail for the World Championship leader.
Let's hope the Jaguars can stay alive in this very, very tough Grand Prix with the high speed and hard braking.
The other thing to watch at this circuit, Billy, year in, year out, there's almost invariably chaos through this first turn, first chicane complex, so watch that with interest in a couple of moments when the cars come down and grid up. Different winners so far in the championship this year. David Coulthard, the winner in Australia. Kimi Raikkonen in Malaysia, Fisichella in Brazil, Michael Schumacher in San Marino in Spain, in Austria, and of course Montoya 2 weeks back in Monaco. As McLaren make final preparations now on Raikkonen's car. And remember that they are standing by for the race to start before they can effect certain changes. That's why the crew's on standby there in the pit lane. They don't want to have a situation such as happened to Mark Webber in Austria, where ultimately he was penalised. Ralph Furman.
Let's go now to Martin Brundle and James Allen.
Just getting themselves ready. They're not actually doing anything on the car. They're just, in fact, the wheels are off. So they've decided to take the wheels off. They're not going to put them on until the race has started for real.
OK, let's concentrate on the start now, because this is crucial into turn 1. 5 lights on, they're off now. They go away so slowly, but they're launching themselves towards the first goal. Watch Michael Schumacher attacking Montoya. Will he break deep? No, he doesn't. That was pretty clever by Montoya. He went round the outside of Michael Schumacher, didn't give any challenge whatsoever to his teammate Ralf Schumacher, who leads this Grand Prix. Alonso has got a good start. He's maintained position. And look at Webber attacking the Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello. But as they go through the S's and down towards the back chicane, at the front at least, it's the same order as they left the grid.
Yes, they were 3 or 4 wide there in turn 1, but I don't think anybody tripped over another car. So once again, exemplary driving from the 18 drivers that took the first corner together, and Raikkonen and Furman with no sight of them yet as to where they actually are at this time.
Looks like De Matter is attacking. He's made up some ground at the start. Ralf Schumacher leads. Montoya's second. Michael Schumacher's third. Alonso fourth. Rubens Barrichello is in 5th place. Then Mark Webber's 6th. Panis 7th for Toyota. 8th for Toyota De Matter. 9th is Trulli. 10th David Coulthard making a place up from the grid.
A Jaguar touched there. He tried to go up the inside. There was a Renault, and I think it was Coulthard were getting together. Pitzonia tried to take advantage of that on the inside of the hairpin and tagged his nose, and off comes the front wing. He ran into the back of the Renault. I think Coulthard was on the outside of them.
So at the end of lap 1 then, Ralf Schumacher goes into turn 1 the fastest. We've got side-by-side battle going down the straight between Trulli and De Matter. The Toyotas are certainly running quite light on fuel. That's the paddock gossip. They're probably going to be coming in around about lap 20, if not before. We're expecting Alonso probably around that sort of time, maybe slightly later. Ferraris, expect them in around lap 27 to 30, and the Williams is somewhere in between the Renaults and the Ferraris. And where is Kimi Raikkonen? He is up into 18th place. He's 13.5 seconds behind race leader Ralf Schumacher at the end of lap 1.
Yes, so Raikkonen 18th, Furman 19th. Pitzonia has pitted for a new front, and Rubens Barrichello has also lost his front wing. Clearly he's tagged that on somebody. That'll slow him down heavily. He will pit at the end of the lap. It'll cost about 12 seconds to change that, plus the time it takes to negotiate the pit lane. Not really any point in blocking another driver at this stage.
Well, I was going to say, where do you stand on that? Because clearly Webber's going to get him. He's not going to be able to... he's just holding him up, isn't he?
Yeah, it's... Anyway, I mean, he may say, well, look, if I save 2 or 3 seconds, maybe I will be in racing with this guy later on, so I'll take those 2 seconds now. So Barrichello...
Oh, Montoya! Montoya's had an incident. Sorry to interrupt you, Martin, but you can see that Montoya has lost about 5 places. He slipped down behind the Jaguar of Mark Webber. He slotted in just in front of Panis, so one presumes he's had some sort of incident through the final chicane, possibly a spin, as Barrichello pits.
All happening then in the early stages of this Grand Prix as they're just touching. I did see Barrichello and Alonso very close company heading into the start of the second lap, so maybe they touched down into turn 1. Away goes Barrichello. It's a 14-second nose change, plus of course the time down the pit lane. And here I think you're going to see Pitzonia trying to take advantage of that and tagging the back of Jarno Trulli. Coulthard would pass Trulli at the end of that straight and now runs 8th, and this then is that, look, he spun. Montoya spun it out on the final corner, James. That's why he lost 4 places.
It's exactly what Jacques Villeneuve did on Friday qualifying. Here comes Trulli. He was tagged by Pitzonia, as we just saw, into the hairpin. Probably a puncture then for one of the rear tyres. He's put a new set of boots on. Didn't see them putting any fuel into the car. And Trulli going out.
Well, surely they fueled it while he was in. We were just looking at the front of the car, and we're hearing they did fuel the car. So he goes a lap down then, because the leader's just gone past, and there you see the pit lane turning in and joining at turn 2, and he yields then to second place man Michael Schumacher. So Schumacher R first, Schumacher M second, Alonso third, Webber fourth, Montoya maintaining fifth, Panis, D'Amata, Coulthard, Villeneuve, Frentzen is 10th.
Yeah, Montoya's going to be kicking himself for that spin, because it's not only dropped him down to 5th place, he's got a lot of work to do now behind Alonso and Webber, but it's also given Michael Schumacher there in the Ferrari exactly what he needed. He can just stare at the back of his brother's car, almost certain that he's got more fuel in his Ferrari than the Williams has got in front of him, possibly by as much as 4 or 5, 6 laps. Who knows? We'll find out shortly. And the pendulum swinging a little bit towards Michael Schumacher. He's the fastest man on the racetrack at the moment, and 1.8 seconds behind his brother Ralph.
Raikkonen is up to 16th, just behind Jenson Button. He hasn't actually passed a car, it has to be said, Kimi Raikkonen. They've all pitted for noses, a punctured tyre, or fell off the road, or whatever. All 20 cars running at this time, and Ralf Schumacher leads. And Justin Wilson, as ever, a great start, and he's in P11.
That's astonishing. Justin Wilson qualified down in 18th place. Teammate Verstappen was 15th, and Verstappen is 13th now. Wilson up to 11th. So Minardi, having had a very torrid weekend off the track, challenging the other team owners to come up with some money to try and keep them in business. Well, on track, they're having a wonderful time today. Here's Montoya, though, attacking Mark Webber, taking up back 4th place from the Jaguar driver. That's a replay.
Yes, we didn't see the pass itself, but where we have it, is that Alonso, isn't it? I think that's Alonso slowing.
Well, Trulli rejoined with the other gang, didn't he? That's probably Alonso just gone through the frame. No, it's Trulli you can see coasting. Yeah. He rejoined from the pit lane around where Michael Schumacher was on the racetrack. So, yeah, that makes sense. So, obviously, a lot of incidents already. We're only 5 laps into this Grand Prix. Pitsonia, Trulli, Barrichello have all had incidents. Furman and Raikkonen have started from the pit lane. And currently Raikkonen 22.9 seconds behind the race leader. He's stuck behind Jenson Button. He can't get past him.
Down into the 1:16s then is Michael Schumacher. The lead was 1.4 seconds. Last time they crossed this start-finish line, they're approaching now. Over he goes for a 17.3 for Ralph and a 17.0 for Michael. 1.2 then the lead now. He's easily pulling him in. And there really is the great unknown this afternoon in terms of how your tyres and brakes going to cope with this, because they've virtually no data from dry running whatsoever.
No, the only people who've done any serious dry running are the 4 teams that take part in Friday morning testing as Trulli coasts around to try and get back to the pits. That's Renault, Jaguar, Jordan and Minardi. They got 2 hours of dry running on Friday morning. But apart from that, it started to rain shortly afterwards, and it really didn't let up until after free practice on Saturday. So really just the single lap qualifying and a brief warm-up yesterday. The only information that Ferrari, McLaren, Williams and the rest have on how their brakes will work today, how their tyres will grain, blister and generally wear over the course of the 3 stints that we're likely to see this afternoon. A 2-stop race in prospect, we think, for a few of the cars. Some of them might try and stretch it to a 1-stopper. And, well, Martin, cast your mind back 2 years. The battle between Ralf Schumacher and his brother Michael here decided in Ralph's favour on that occasion, winning here for Williams 2001 after a really close battle. Just like this, they were really nose to tail throughout the Grand Prix. What will happen this afternoon, I wonder?
Michael Schumacher was so close to that wall that he's hit before. Really just shows you how hard he's pushing to put his younger brother under pressure. The gap down to 0.9 of a second now, and they're 7 seconds clear of Alonso, Montoya and co. And Trulli then has managed to creep back into the pits.
Raikkonen at the moment is in 16th place, and he is losing 3 seconds a lap at the moment to the leaders. He's got to get past the Button-Fisichella battle in front of him as Trulli's in the pits. Let's hear from Ted.
I think it's a gear selection problem for Jarno Trulli. Executive Director of Engineering Pat Stimmons looking over the front suspension, looking very carefully at the front right wheel hub. No, I think he's saying there's something wrong with it. No, now he's saying put the tyre back on. Maybe that's okay. They were standing by with a spare steering wheel, but that looks to be in place. Now they've still got a problem on that left front.
And the replay you're watching, as Ted's talking, I think, is from where he lost the carcass of the tyre early on, and that will be very hot. Good job he's got some gloves on, because a punctured tyre gets supremely hot, and that's why why the tread ends up falling away from the bead like that. But I think that was the earlier incident for Trulli. Wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't have a drivetrain problem. He took quite a punch in the rear wheel in the hairpin.
Well, not only that, but having lost the main carcass of the tyre out on the back of the lap, he had at least a mile and a half to go to get back to the pits, and I can't imagine the car really enjoyed doing that journey without most of its right rear tyre.
No, as long as the carcass stays in a circle, it doesn't flail and break away the bodywork and the rear wing. But this then is the gap, less than a second now, and in fact a little over half second by the looks of that one. And they're just way faster than anybody else, except for Montoya, who's fourth and recovering.
Just give you an idea then of the relative pace. At the front, the two Schumacher brothers lapping in the low 1:17 range. Alonso, he's in the mid 1:18 range. Montoya is closing him down. He's just 0.4 of a second behind the Renault driver. He's lapping in the mid-17s. Webber, he can't keep the pace at the moment. He's in the 1:19s, as are Panis, Damata and Coulthard, and the rest more or less the same from there. This is on board, though, with world champion Michael Schumacher. And no, look at this. This guy's just having such bad reliability problems. Heinz-Harald Frentzen once again had an engine failure on Friday, and now look at him.
I was looking at something else. Has he spun off, or did he have a mechanical failure or whatever? It looked like he binned it when I just caught a quick glance of it as I turned back to the screens. But Justin Wilson up to P10 now in the Ecclestone Minardi.
Perhaps you'd like to explain that reference, the Ecclestone Minardi.
Well, Paul said that, didn't he, on ITV? Didn't he say Bernie's helped him out or joined the team or something? And look, this is for third place. Alonso just ahead of Montoya. Montoya with a lot of straight line speed here. Talking of straight line speeds, I've been looking on the computer, and Michael Schumacher must have dropped a little bit of wing off, because he is just about the fastest in all the speed traps. So if he does catch up with his brother, then he looks like he's got enough straight line speed to do something about it. This then is on board with Montoya into turn 5. You're looking at the back of Alonso, and nowhere to overtake really. If you get a good slingshot out of 7 down under the tunnel into the wide bridge, it's not really a tunnel, down into 8's a half a chance, but then the hairpin and the final corner are your best chances to get round somebody here. That is Villeneuve. He is P9, holding up Justin Wilson.
Yeah, Villeneuve's done well. They've all done well, these guys. Villeneuve started 14th on the grid. He's now 9th. Wilson started 18th on the grid. He's now 10th. So they've really made up some ground, as has Heidfeld there as well in the mix. Now, the straight line speed-wise, let's just talk about these two here. Yesterday in practice, and of course in qualifying rather, and of course they've not been allowed to change anything since then. Not 5 miles an hour is the difference between the BMW Williams of Montoya and the Renault of Fernando Alonso in a straight line. Montoya can do about 205 miles an hour down that back straightaway, and the Renault just nudges under 200 miles an hour.
So Kimi Räikkönen, the World Championship leader, still down in 15th, lapping, actually falling slightly away from Jenson Button and Giancarlo Fisichella, because he's very heavy on fuel, of course. He'll get a bit of dividend, a bit of payback later on in the race. This is the two Schumacher brothers then challenging for first and second places.
Yes, Michael now much closer to the race leader than he's been at any time during the Grand Prix. Looks like he's lining him up for a pass here. Neither of them really were able to get past each other 2 years ago. There was a little bit of side-by-side stuff. Certainly Ralph trying to get past Michael, but nothing really paid off. That race was decided through the pit stop strategy. And was decided in pit stops, that race. I'll tell you another man who's having a bit of a struggle with traffic this afternoon is David Coulthard. Had a terrific time this time. Side by side here as Montoya attacks Alonso. We cut to see Trulli, and Alonso has, Montoya has made that pass stick. So that was a nice move into the hairpin from Juan Pablo Montoya. He's back up now into third place.
Yes, Trulli clearly with some handling problem. Alonso dreaming he might overtake that Williams, not a prayer. He doesn't have enough straight line speed, and a little bit loose at the back end as well, the Renault. So Montoya will now, I think, comfortably pull away from there. That's probably good news in terms of us watching the race. He's 11 seconds adrift of the two Schumis in front of him, and I think Montoya can maybe start to do something about that now.
Why is he in third place? Well, he had a spin, for those of you just joining us, with 60 laps to go in this 70-lap Canadian Grand Prix. Montoya had a spin very early on, dropped him from second down to fifth. He's had to fight his way back ever since. He's passed Mark Webber. He's passed now Fernando Alonso. He's up into third place with a clear track in front of him. And I was just mentioning, just before that pass, David Coulthard. He's stuck behind the two Toyotas of DeMatter and Panis. They're circulating pretty much together in 6th and 7th places. He'll be hoping that they are going to come in for a pit stop quite early, but it won't be for at least another 5 or 10 laps. And Coulthard is having pain here, definitely.
Yeah, so Trulli spinning out there then. Looks like his traction control is not working, as you then cut to see Montoya taking over that 3rd place. So a very bad corner and a bad lap for the Renault team. Here's the leaders then, over the line. 0.4 of a second is the difference. He's really halted Michael's charge now as Michael gets into the turbulent air. The air that passes over that Williams, and he's worked very hard to press the car into the ground in terms of downforce. It's very turbulent, very destructive air then as it comes off the back wing, and as it meets your front wing and you're following behind, it doesn't work as well. And look at Coulthard with a good run out of the last chicane. He's got the line into the next corner, and DeMatter is going to have to be last of the late breakers, and he's the first of the early breakers. Nice move by David Coulthard. He's making progress here. We believe he's carrying more fuel than most of the front runners. McLaren have gone for quite a conservative strategy here, and Coulthard unfortunately lost ground with a big mistake as Jos Verstappen pits from 15th place in the Minardi. Coulthard lost half a second yesterday in qualifying due to a big mistake. Otherwise, he might have been even more of a contender this afternoon, but he's definitely trying to make up ground in the Grand Prix. He's now up into 7th place and ready to attack Panis for 6th. So the Minardi's on a 3-stopper. It may well explain why Wilson's so lively in the middle of the pack. Still running 10th, still going very well, it has to be said. Justin Wilson chasing the Villeneuve down for all he's worth. Schumacher M, 0.7 apart now. Montoya is closing them down slowly but surely. 3/4 per lap. Montoya is beginning to catch the leaders as we watch David Coulthard take the long way round into turn 1. Better on the brakes, and sees he's got enough space, just leaves enough in case DeMatter snatches a break and runs into him. Gave him a bit of a wide berth. So on lap 13, Ralf Schumacher leading. You can see the margin for yourself over Michael Schumacher. Montoya 11 seconds behind. Alonso 4th, Webber 5th, 6th is Panis, and closing down on him is David Coulthard.
Well, as we wait for the ITV commentators to come back from their break, Neil, your thoughts on this battle up front? Michael looking very, very quick.
Looking very threatening at the moment, Billy, but what about that run through the first corner and the first chicane after having so many incidents over so many years? They actually got through and did the job cleanly on lap 1, turn 1. Bad news for Pizzoni, getting tangled up with Trulli in the first lap. Montoya, a spin through the first chicane at the end of the first lap, but he's now charging back, and that was a lovely move on Alonso to position 3. Trulli's obviously got some sort of a drama, and he's come in for the 2nd time. Frentzen, I can confirm, is out of the motor race. And they are now lapping in the low 17 range. It's Schumacher Ralf, Schumacher Michael, Montoya in position 3, then Alonso. Webber doing a great job, well and truly in the points, position 5. Panis in position 6, Coulthard 7. Cristiano DeMatter is 8th. Remember, Chris had a run at this circuit last year in the Champ car. He does have some knowledge and understanding of the place. Villeneuve is 9th, and Justin Wilson is in the top 10 in, as Martin Riley described, the Eccleston Minardi, Billy.
Which, as he said too, looks like it's pretty light. But even so, those Minardis have been so slow that even running light hasn't been good enough to keep them away. So it's a good job from Wilson nevertheless. Webber, not in a lot of traffic, Neil, which will help because he certainly hasn't had an incident-free season. So it's nice to see him on his own for a little while.
And incidentally, just as we were talking about Wilson, he has now pitted, which would confirm a 3-stop strategy for those guys. Here's the BARs. Shocker in qualifying for those guys. They're scrapping at the moment back in the order. Villeneuve up to position 9, Button down in 13. Montoya, incidentally, has just gone fastest. He's recorded a 1:16.8. And the World Championship leader, Kimi Raikkonen, is in position 14 as we prepare to return you back to the ITV commentary with Martin and James. This is heading down into the first chicane. Pretty lively battle here between the Sauber and the BAR. Let's go back to ITV.
Lap 15 in Montreal, and Jacques Villeneuve seems to be in trouble. His brakes seem to be going away from him. He's just dropped 5 or 6 places. He was at the front of this scrap here, which involves Heidfeld, Fisichella, Button and Raikkonen, the scrap for 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th places. And there you can see David Coulthard attacking Panis. That's the battle for 6th place. At the front, nothing changed. Still the 2 Schumacher brothers, nose to tail. Montoya, though, fastest man on the racetrack at the moment as Villeneuve dives into the pits. Montoya closing the gap slowly to the top 2.
Yes, we saw Villeneuve, even in turn 3, which is not a heavy braking corner, with glowing front discs. They haven't got, look, they're having to put fire extinguisher on it. You've got to do something to give him some more front brake cooling, and they're struggling to get those brake temperatures under control. And that's exactly what we were talking about on the grid and early in the race, because it's always heavy on brakes. There's high-speed straights and always into a big stop.
Yep, there are 2 points on this circuit. One of them is at the end of the long straight into the final chicane, where you hit 5 Gs momentarily on the braking. It really is enormous. You were up in that jet fighter pulling 7 Gs in a banked turn, which I'm not sure must have had your stomach coming through to the back of your mouth. But 5 Gs on the braking is pretty hard work around here. This is the battle for the lead, though, going through some traffic. Minardi's in the mix there.
Panis has pitted in the Toyota, so the Toyota short-fueled as well. There he is. He was running 5th. That releases Coulthard. So the leaders are on lap 16. Panis is about to start lap 16. And look, they're finding their way through the back markers, through past the Minardi, and they're working the traffic well, the pair of them.
Kimi Raikkonen is up to 11th place, but the bad news for him is the margin to the leaders has doubled in the last 4 or 5 laps. He was within about 20-odd seconds of the front 2. Now he's 53 seconds behind the race leader. As we look at a replay of Trulli, who's had a hugely incident-filled race already. Just looking at another incident.
Yes, just looking out of the window, Michael misses the chicane. This is Montoya. He misses the chicane. And just a few seconds ago, Michael Schumacher missed the chicane there. That's why he's fallen back a little bit. As long as you don't lose or gain, sorry, as long as you don't gain a place by going through there, you get away with it. He should not be penalised. And also, he didn't really save a place by going through there. He just basically outbraked himself. But I think if they went charging through there every time, you find yourself half a second. Louise?
Yeah, I'm down in the VAR garage at the moment, as we just saw Jacques Villeneuve having all sorts of problems with his brakes. The team, as you can probably see, have just brought him in again. They're going to bring the car into the garage and have a further look at those brakes, see if they can correct that problem once and for all. But obviously, this is going to cost him a lot of time.
Yes, and continuing his bad luck at this racetrack. What's happened there is his brake fluid will have boiled. That heat dissipates into the caliper and into the fluid, and you get bubbles in there, and it takes forever to get that out. That's a big job to sort his brakes out. And you'd have to be wondering where Jenson Button stands as well. Similar car, you assume they've got their biggest brake ducts on them, so Button may well suffer the same problem later on.
DeMatter comes into the pits, thus confirming both Toyotas were running light on fuel. The Panis car had 16 laps worth, the DeMatter car had just 17 laps worth. And just looking at Jacques Villeneuve's race record here, it really is unfortunate. It's his home Grand Prix, and the only result he's ever had here was the first time he came here for Williams in '96 for 2nd place. Since then, he's had 4 or 5 retirements and a 15th place. Not much to show from his home Grand Prix, and not today, once again, emulating the feat of his great father. 25 years ago, Gilles Villeneuve winning here for Ferrari, the first time we raced here at the Ile de Notre Dame circuit. This is the battle for the lead then. Look at the gap. Montoya has been able to cut down 8.7 seconds now to Michael Schumacher. Montoya coming back into the mix.
Yes, he slightly was halted while he went through that traffic. We saw the two leaders going through, but he has brought the gap down from about 11 seconds to just under 9. So hopefully Montoya will come into play and make this a 3-way fight later on. The Jaguar just gone across the chicane in front of me here outside the window. It was pit zone here, but he's running down in 17th. Remember, we saw him nosed into the barrier at the hairpin, and he had to stop for a new front nose on a new front wing on the car. Villeneuve, it's showing, has retired from the Grand Prix on the computer. He sat in the car in the garage. I wonder if they'll try and get him some brakes back.
Kimi Raikkonen comes into the top 10 then with the pit stop of DeMatter. Let's take another look at the start then, Martin. Not massively eventful. They went in. Michael Schumacher did get alongside Montoya, though, didn't he?
Yes, he did indeed, didn't he? Montoya getting a bit brave on the brakes into turn 1. Michael Schumacher probably thinking of his World Championship chances, and behind them they were fanned out 2, 3 and 4 abreast out of your view there. Really head-to-head at the front, isn't it? Montoya's just had a very poor lap, a 19.2. So where the leaders did a 16.9, he's lost 3 seconds, and the lead and his deficit is now back to 11 seconds. Ted.
Well, Martin, we've been saying that Michael should be able to go much longer than Ralf Schumacher, but I tell you, he's not going to be able to go that much longer as Williams actually come out for their stop. Ralph's been suffering with wear rates on his rear tyres, so they're going to have to try and adjust some of the pressures on his stop. That's coming up probably this lap or the next one.
It's exactly what Michael Schumacher wanted. He's getting good returns from his Bridgestone tyres here this afternoon. Yesterday in qualifying, as Heidfeld makes a stop, it was all about Michelin. But today, you've got to say that Fisichella, Button, they're all going strongly on the Bridgestone tyres, and so is Michael Schumacher. No doubt about it. And if Ralf Schumacher does have to make a stop imminently, that's exactly what Michael needed. Yes,
Ralph's just done a 16.6 for a new fastest lap, so it's Montoya then that's pitting first. As I said, his deficit was 11 seconds. He really could have done without that poor lap. Just one bad lap can spoil your whole afternoon, despite there being 70 of them. On the rev limiter, the speed limiter, that effectively turns into down the pit lane, and you coast into your garage of 21 men who are getting ready to change your wheels and tyres, top you up with fuel, and send you on your way. Nice wide pit lane here, and a solid stop for Williams.
Webber's also in for Jaguar, slightly earlier than we expected then. This is lap 20 of 70. And we've got a Jaguar of Webber. We've got Montoya's made a stop. So at the front, Ralf Schumacher, Michael Schumacher, Alonso yet to make their stops. Coulthard hasn't stopped. Neither has Fisichella or Button or Raikkonen. They're all the heavier cars going into this Grand Prix. Fisichella's starting to look quite handy, you know, Martin, in 6th place. Jordan always tend to put a fair bit of gas in their car, don't they? And he's right in the mix here.
He is indeed. Raikkonen, unfortunately, has lost so much time as Ralf Schumacher, the leader, pits then and releases Michael Schumacher. This is working so well for Ferrari, and it's working well for Coulthard too. Ted.
Yes, Ralf Schumacher comes down the pit lane. I can only see rear tyres out for Ralf Schumacher. I can only assume that they're just going to change the rears. Let's see. Hits his marks very well. That's right. The fronts stay on. Those Michelins stay on. No problems with the refueling, so just the rears change. He prefers the balance that way. We said that he was having wear problems. 8.8. Not a bad stop for the race leader.
Yes, and of course it's always the fuel that takes, well, providing they change the tyres properly, it's always the fuel that takes longer. So they're not saving any time with leaving the fronts on. They just don't want to go through that period where the Michelins tend to grain and understeer. So Ralf electing, obviously this is not a high tyre wear circuit, it's quite a low grip surface. It's the rears spinning up that wear out a little bit. The fronts don't work so hard here, and Ralf then electing to keep with what he knows.
Well, provided that was a scheduled stop, we certainly know that Ralf Schumacher took on about 60 kilos of fuel there in those 8.9 seconds that he was stationary for. That should get him about as far as lap 44 in this 70-lap race. Now, Ferrari are out in the pit lane. Is it going to be Michael Schumacher who moves past Ralf Furman and straight into the pit lane? Slick move there by Michael, and he comes a nice straight line into the pit lane. This is much earlier than we expected. Is it a tyre wear issue, I wonder? Or he hasn't really had the laps to capitalise on Ralf Schumacher coming in, so it's going to be touch and go to see which one of these two is going to be leading when Michael rejoins.
It's what you'd call a first-in two-stopper, really, a short first-in two-stopper, I should say. He should be away something in the 8s. If not, it's not a great stop. It's not a great stop, because that clearly won't refuel him to the end, and somehow or other that didn't quite work out, that one.
So where's Ralf Schumacher? There he is, side by side, and it's done enough for Michael. He's not quite up to speed yet, but he's got enough to just do it. So that was, well, that was remarkable by Ferrari. Michael Schumacher's in-lap must have been pretty competitive to have made that work, and Ralf Schumacher must have lost a little time on his outlap because his pit stop was almost 2 seconds slower than the Williams drivers, and yet he's still rejoined in front. Yeah, and that will be massively frustrating for Ralf.
Indeed, Ralf lost some time, as you said, the out and the in-lap Louise with Jacques Villeneuve.
Yeah, Jacques, obviously a brake issue for you. The team obviously hoped that they could correct it. Did you think that they would be able to?
No, I could feel there was a brake leak during driving. The pedal was just getting longer and longer during the brakes, and there before I came in the pit there was no rear brakes. Actually, I was doing all the braking with front brake, and at the end I just went to full travel, hit the metal with the pedal, and the car still wouldn't slow down, so it was time to come in.
Fernando Alonso leads the Grand Prix then on lap 22. Not the first time he's led a Grand Prix this season, this young man who's making such a big impression on us. We haven't really talked about him today. We haven't really seen him much today. But the Renault has quietly been getting on with business. As we can see, Giancarlo Fisichella, second Jordan retirement within a lap.
Yes, I think, again, that could be brake problems, because I'm sure I saw a little fire in Ralph Furman's brakes. But both Jordans out, as you rightly say, on the same lap. Montoya, watch him come through here, grazing the wall. He's really going for it, but he's down in 5th place at the moment because Alonso and 4th place man Coulthard have yet to stop.
Yeah, let's just give you a rundown then on lap 23 as the leaders carve their way through some back markers. Alonso leading by 2.9 seconds from Michael Schumacher. Third is Ralf Schumacher, right behind his brother, as they've been together all race. Coulthard, the strategy is appearing to work for the McLaren driver. He was held up earlier on in the race by the Toyotas, but now he's looking quite strong in 4th. Montoya 5th, Button 6th. Raikkonen is up into 7th place.
Just not absolutely sure what that replay, and this is what I saw out the window. Montoya just grazing the wall, got away with it. I mean, he didn't really hit it, he just sort of ran along it. Ted is down there with some information on Jordan.
Yeah, double disaster for Jordan. Both cars out of the race on the same lap. Giancarlo Fisichella was gear selection problems, trying to get his way away from the pit stop. The mechanics pushed him as far as Williams, but by then his brakes were frying and his clutch burnt out. They stopped it. He's back in his box. Let's see if they can try and fix it, try and get him back into the race, but I doubt it.
This is what happens. Your brakes run about 750 to 800 degrees centigrade, and the moment you stop, it just heat soaks all the way back into the system and sets fire to itself on the face of the material, or boils your brake fluid. You can't afford to be stationary for too long, and if you are stationary, you must not leave your foot on the brake, and that's what a lot of drivers forget.
What about this for pace? Fernando Alonso's last lap, a 1:16.823. He must be getting quite close to his own pit stop. Jenson Button pits from 8th place, and so he is in the BAR, the sole remaining BAR. What kind of brake issues does he have? They've taken the fuel hose away, but there's a problem with that car. No, it's finally got out. Some problem engaging possibly first gear, but he certainly lost 2 or 3 seconds on the tail end of that stop for some reason.
Well, we're in for a great duel, aren't we, between the Ferrari and the Williams, both going extremely well. Working well, too, for McLaren now. Coulthard running very fast, up in 5th. Raikkonen up into 6th now, running again, also in the 1:17s. We know he's fueled for a one-stopper because he came into the pits and started the race from the pit lane with put a lot of fuel on board. So it's McLaren beginning to come into this race, but I don't think for race victory. Race victory is between these two, and if Montoya can get into the action. Coulthard pits now from 4th place.
Yep. Alonso, of course, still has to make his stop. He's only 5 seconds ahead of the Schumacher brothers' battle, so he is effectively 20 seconds behind them once he's made his pit stop on the road, as that will work out shortly. Coulthard in then from 4th place. Montoya is then promoted into 4th. How much fuel is the McLaren putting in? Well, it's a 2-stop strategy, no question about that. He will be back in again this afternoon.
Yes, I tell you what, this makes Alonso's qualifying performance look even better. He was P4 on the grid, and he's the last of the main runners to stop. But we do know, as I said yesterday in qualifying, that Renault, a bit down on power, but it's much better on fuel consumption. It enables them to go further into the race, and under these new regulations, James, that really is paying dividend.
Certainly is. Well, it's been an amazing turnaround in Spain. Ever since this guy exploded onto the scene at the beginning of this year, the viewing figures in Spain for Formula One have gone past motorcycle racing for the first time ever. Because Spanish riders have won in bikes for 20 or 30 years. They really have been eminent in that sport, but in Formula One, never. And now, this year, it's been growing and growing and growing, and it's outstripped the audience for bike racing. That's how popular Fernando Alonso has become in Spain, and you can see why, can't you?
15 runners then. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened on Justin Wilson's pit stop, but it moved him behind teammate Verstappen. The 13 and 14, Pizzonia bringing up the field. Alonso with a 5.9-second lead, but it's not a real lead because he has to pit.
Renault mechanics are out, we're being told, in the pit lane. Can't be for Jarno Trulli. He is no longer classified. We've lost Fisichella, Furman, Villeneuve and Frentzen from this Grand Prix. Trulli is, in fact, still going round in 16th place, so it could potentially be for him, but more likely on lap 26, Fernando Alonso, the race leader, will be coming in.
This is Coulthard exiting the pits, and he is going to be absolutely destroyed to find out he's just behind Barrichello, who has stopped once, but that was for a new nose cone. Barrichello obviously quite heavily loaded for fuel loaded in qualifying then, but also critically, Coulthard is behind Raikkonen, who's on a different race strategy altogether. Will McLaren swap those two around and release Coulthard because otherwise he's going to compromise his afternoon completely as the leader pits for his first scheduled stop of the afternoon, and a little bit of a front wing adjustment going in there too.
Leaving the front tyres on though, not an awful lot of grip, or tread I should say, left on those. Slightly mismatched the way it's worn. The left tyre, front tyre, seems to have worn more than the right one.
Yeah, I don't know where they stand on that, because you've got to keep grooves on the tyres. And you could argue that that car is heading out without its full complement of 4 grooves, knowingly so. Michael Schumacher leads then from Ralf Schumacher, just a half a second in it. Montoya now 12.5 seconds adrift of the main scrap.
Now in 5th place, and trying to minimise the damage that's going to be caused to his World Championship lead by having qualified so poorly yesterday. Michael Schumacher, though, sitting pretty at the top. Rubens Barrichello 6th, David Coulthard 7th, and Mark Webber, the last of the points-paying positions for Jaguar, in 8th.
So we have the Bridgestone-shod Ferrari with Michael Schumacher and the Michelin-shod BMW Williams with Ralf Schumacher, and there's absolutely nothing between the pair of them. We've seen each of them lead the Grand Prix, and neither can pull a margin on the other, and they're really giving it everything they've got out there, riding the curves, leaping off. Michael there on 2 wheels at one point, I think, just trying to break away, make a gap, but it's not going to happen at the moment, I'm delighted to say. Montoya, though, now 13 seconds adrift of this pair.
Well, I've been conducting my own straw poll up and down the paddock this weekend, talking to various engineers from the various teams, saying to them, give me an overview of this season, give me an overview of the balance of power at the front in Formula One. And what they've all pretty much agreed is that the Ferrari car still has quite a margin over the rest of the field. The Williams has got stronger. They've managed to work out the secrets of this new FW25. They've made it more competitive. And McLaren have made the most of last year's car whilst still waiting for their new one. What's keeping McLaren and Williams in it are the Michelin tyres. They do have an advantage at the moment over Bridgestone's. And you can see here today there's nothing in it whatever in terms of performance between Michael Schumacher's Ferrari and the Williams BMW of Ralf Schumacher. The tyres are keeping Ralf in it. The car is keeping Michael in it.
Say Ralph's much better through the slower corners and in the braking zones, particularly the exit of the final chicane too. Michael's got the advantage down the straight at the moment. He's clearly taken a bit of wing off, or chosen to run in qualifying yesterday a little bit lighter on wing. Gives him a great chance this afternoon then of maintaining position in terms of not too many people passing him down the straights, and he can be wide in the corners, but at the moment he doesn't have to be because Ralf can't quite get on terms.
Kimi Raikkonen in 5th place at the moment, 14.5 seconds behind Fernando Alonso. He would dearly love to go away from here today with 3rd or even 4th place if he could. 5th at the moment, still not made his pit stop, Kimi Raikkonen, but he did put a huge amount of fuel in the car. Now that's last year's car, Martin, and David Coulthard got 50 laps into the Grand Prix last year with that car. So we're only on lap 31. Kimi can go a lot further yet as Pitsonia pits.
Pitsonia is running 15th and last at the moment. The sort of stops we've seen this afternoon, isn't it? Schumi 1 and Schumi 2 then. Imagine it's Father's Day. Imagine if you were Mr. Schumacher Senior seeing your 2 boys out there. I know what it's like when I watch my son Alex in a kart race, let alone seeing your 2 sons leading a Grand Prix. But of course, he's seen that several times before. These 2 really have had some good fights over the years. We've often wondered if Ralf yields a little bit too easily to his brother sometimes, but here they've had some ding-dongs, no doubt about it, and both driving beautifully.
How is Alex? Are these guys here, Alonso and Webber, got anything to fear in the near future?
We don't have to wait and see. There's a long way to go on that, but let's wait and see on that one. But Raikkonen's just done the middle fastest sector of anybody in the Grand Prix, and of course now he's beginning to get quite low on fuel. He's out of sync with the rest of the field on a one-stopper, so his fuel is falling away. and of course Barrichello, Coulthard and Co have all been in and topped up, so this is the moment when Raikkonen can make the difference, and he took best part of a second and a half out of fourth place man Alonso on the previous lap.
Yeah, and of course the thing to remember here is that although Raikkonen does have to make another pit stop, so does everybody else. Most of the two stoppers came in sometime in the early 20s, and they'll have to come in sometime in the mid to late 40s. Kimi Raikkonen we expect to come in around about the same time, anything from 47 through to 50 for the McLaren drivers. So effectively this is an aggregate position that Raikkonen has nothing to fear, and as his fuel load burns off, he can attack Alonso. As Martin was just describing, that car, the McLaren, certainly is a quicker car at the moment than the Renault. It certainly should be with all the power it's got, and so Raikkonen has an opportunity here this afternoon.
It's all about damage limitation for Kimi Raikkonen. They've all got to stop one more time. Raikkonen's a half a minute away from the lead, but he can still, he's the quickest man on the racetrack at the moment, mind you. So 1:16.7 he's just done, very, very close to the fastest lap of anybody. So Raikkonen really on a charge.
Top 8 then on lap 33 as we approach half distance in Montreal. Awful lot still to happen here. Michael Schumacher leads Ralf Schumacher 0.6 of a second, as it's been all race. The two of them have been held together as if one of them was towing the other along through the race. Montoya third, Alonso fourth, fifth is Raikkonen, sixth is Barrichello, seventh is David Coulthard, and eighth Mark Webber.
The brothers out in front. Neil, I'm interested in Mark Webber, though. What was the story? Running very slow lap times early in the race. Was it tyre choice?
Well, that's one possibility. He opted for the softer of the Michelin options, and he just isn't showing the kind of lap speed performance to get on terms at the moment. He's in position 8. His last lap was a 1:18.4. When you look at the Schumacher brothers, for example, their last lap, 17.4, 17.4 respectively. Oh, we've got a McLaren with a problem here, and it's Kimi Raikkonen with the right rear completely destroyed. That car yet to actually take its stop. And now, of course, the situation is forced upon them, and that's a very unusual failure. And the tyre carcass actually separating completely from the rim there, just at the pit lane entry. And hopefully no bodywork damage done to the McLaren, and he rejoins lap 33. He was in position 5 at that point ahead of Barrichello. Meanwhile,
that wrecks their race strategy now, doesn't it?
Well, it'd be interesting to know just how much further they were likely to run with that car build. But they would have been fundamentally basing everything on their fuel burn and perhaps not necessarily thinking about their tyre. Now, whether that was a wear issue or whether there was debris on the circuit, we won't know.
Second time in the race, incidentally, we've seen a carcass go flying across the circuit here. Not too often you see them changing rear tyres only in the Grand Prix, but we've seen a lot of that. Good run for the Eccleston Minardi team. I just love that one, and I know you did too, Neil.
Yeah, they've put up quite a respectable show this afternoon, or this evening. Let's go back to the ITV commentary with James and Martin.
Distance then in the Canadian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher leads from his brother Ralf. That's the margin. They're just lapping the Sauber of Nick Heidfeld, currently running in 12th place. Montoya still third, Alonso fourth. Look at this though, just a moment ago. Kimi Raikkonen, who had managed to get himself up into 5th place, a puncture. Second Michelin car we've seen to shed the mid-carcass of its tyre, and that's cost him, Martin. He's down in 10th place now.
Yes, but he's on the one stop, and look, he's lucky for 2 reasons. Because it was just before the pit entry that he lost that tyre. Barrichello just missed the tyre carcass poloing down the road. There's the end of the stop. It's 11.8 seconds. Touch and go whether they got enough fuel in that to get to the end of the Grand Prix. But also the flailing sidewalls did not damage the rear wing of Kimi Raikkonen's car. So very lucky, although I'm sure he had to pit somewhat earlier than he really wanted to. Ted.
Yes, Martin, but I do think they did get enough fuel in that to see Kimi Raikkonen to the end of the race. There would, of course, be some fuel still left in that tank because he had a good well, 7 or 8 laps left until he had to come in. I was looking at that tyre when it came off, completely delaminated. It's difficult to know at the moment whether that was because it got a puncture or whether the tyre just collapsed of its own accord.
It's usually, when it does that, it's usually a puncture because it's running hot. And the high speed, when you're doing over 200 miles an hour, just the centrifugal force keeps the tyre up. But it runs very, very hot, and it burns away the sidewalls where the carcass meets the sidewalls. And off we go. We have that loads of times at Le Mans, and it's a very scary thing. Suddenly it drops down in one corner, lifts the opposite corner off the ground. Barrichello is charging very hard now. Remember, he pitted early on for a new nose, where presumably, James, they really did tank him up, and he's pushing very hard indeed. He knows he's got to get some quick laps in now. Surely he'll be due for a pit stop soon.
Well, Martin mentioned Le Mans just there. News coming through from France today that Marc Blundell, our own Marc Blundell from F1 ITV, finishing second for Bentley, a 1-2 for Bentley after 70-odd years. The Bentley boys have won Le Mans. Tom Christensen's car winning the race. Marc Blundell, Johnny Herbert, David Braddon finishing second. Here's a man going away with nothing. Jacques Villeneuve changed into his civvies, and he walks disconsolately away with manager Craig Pollock. And once again, you've got to say the BAR team, a tale of two halves of the garage. Jenson Button's car, seemingly reliable, runs like a Swiss watch. Jacques Villeneuve's car seems to break down with alarming regularity. The team admitted themselves. Dave Richards, the team principal, said himself it's simply not good enough that Jacques' car keeps letting him down. People shouldn't judge him too harshly. We're not doing a good enough job. But it just keeps happening to him, Martin.
Here we see again, it does indeed, here we see again, Ralf Schumacher's quicker under braking, better on turning, Michael's quicker down the straight. That's why they're so even Stevens.
Well, looking back at that tyre coming off of Kimi Raikkonen, we saw the same thing happening with Jarno Trulli, and brings us back to something Ross Brawn was saying to Martin on the grid. We really are stepping into the unknown here. Very little dry running throughout the weekend. Nobody had any proper data, particularly for brakes and tyre wear. And, well, Villeneuve's fallen foul of the brakes. A couple of guys have fallen foul of the tyres. Who else might fall foul of them as the race goes on? Once again, Montoya, looks like his right wing mirror is loose. Yeah, there it is, flailing around.
That's not too much of a drama as long as he's got the left one. And even then you can pretty much ignore what's going on behind you unless you're in a good scrap. So that would have passed through his cockpit, hopefully not into the air intake just above his head, passed away from the car. But look at these two Schumacher brothers, absolutely hammer and tongs at it. Montoya's brought the gap down to 11.6 seconds. There was a new fastest lap of the Grand Prix a while back by Rubens Barrichello, 1:16.3. They're still not matching last year's pace, James. I think it's because they've not been putting the rubber down on the racetrack this year. As we've seen, there's been so much wet running here, and a lot of other races with cars using much harder tyres in Formula 1, pulling up anything that they have managed to get down, and the track, therefore, not in prime condition in terms of speed.
Well, as we look at this engaging scrap between the two Schumacher brothers, it's been going on for the last 39 laps. Ralph led the first stint, Michael led after the pit stops. Even though his own pit stop was slightly slower in terms of stationary time than the Williams, he managed to rejoin ahead of his brother, who made a stop one lap later. Let me tell you a little bit about Kimi Raikkonen. Started from the pit lane here today, got himself as high as 5th place, had to drop down to 10th after we saw that tyre issue. He's now on the back of the two Toyotas of Panis and D'Amata. They are behind Mark Webber in the Jaguar, but if you bear in mind that Raikkonen doesn't have to stop again, and all the cars in front of him do, given that it takes 25 seconds to make a pit stop here in Montreal, he is aggregate. If he can get ahead of the two Toyotas, he might slot himself back in ahead of Barrichello in 5th place. That's what he's trying to do here this afternoon, get 4th or 5th place. If he can beat Alonso, so much the better. If he can beat Barrichello, that's the target. So Raikkonen, a big challenge, percentage driving here today for him.
Yeah, he's going to struggle though, James. He's well, he's way off, these 70 seconds off the lead, although, as you say, he doesn't have to stop again, but he's lapping down in the 1:18s now. So he's dropping another second a lap with a car that is so fat on fuel, and he is some 28 seconds behind Barrichello and going more slowly. Therefore, a pit stop doesn't take 28 seconds. So at the moment, it's not working well enough for Kimi Raikkonen. Montoya's got the gap down to 10 seconds now with a new fastest lap of 1:16.349. Here comes Barrichello. passing and into the pit. So finally, Barrichello makes a fuel stop there. This is his second trip in. The first was for a nose, where they obviously tanked it right up, and Rubens in the pits. He was 5th when he came in.
So let's see what this does for him. Coulthard was 11 seconds behind Barrichello. He will pass him then on the racetrack, as will Mark Webber. It'll be touch and go actually for Mark Webber. That looks a bit wobbly, that side, that barge board.
Yeah, that's what the ones we saw fall off, isn't it? Back in Australia on Michael Schumacher's car, I'd imagine maybe that got a little bit of damage when his nose broke and came underneath the car early in the Grand Prix. Coulthard's got a problem. He's P5. Coulthard is doing very slow laps at the moment, so we think there's an impending problem for David Coulthard as Panis pits from what was 8th place. Louise.
Yeah, just a little update for you on some of the retirees. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, first man out, he had a transmission failure. We've heard about Jacques Villeneuve's brake issue. Giancarlo Fisichella, as we suspected, that was a gear selection problem. Thurman, engine failure. Jarno Trulli, well, where to start with him? It's probably easier to tell you what didn't go wrong, but ultimately the team brought him in after his second puncture, really because they weren't sure what caused them, so it was a safety measure.
OK, thank you for that, Louise. As Louise was talking there, you saw that loose barge board James spotted in the pit stop coming off Barrichello's car. That'll hurt his handling a little bit. There it is, missing. And everybody managed to swerve around it, with the exception of Cristiano De Matta, who hit it with the Toyota. And you can so easily pick up a puncture. The tyre's heavily loaded at 180 miles an hour. If you hit something hard, it doesn't have to be that sharp, it can often damage your own tyre. So Barrichello then running at P7 at the moment, and Coulthard's done another slow lap too. He's back in the 1 minute 20s now, 3-4 seconds adrift. So we don't know what his problem is, but he's not fast.
No, he certainly isn't. He's got Mark Webber bearing down on him now, the Jaguar driver. In fact, has got past him. Webber up into 5th place, unseen by us. But Mark Webber has got past David Coulthard and is now in 5th place. So a problem for him. Problems also then for Rubens Barrichello. You can see that barge board is missing. Was it Australia when Michael Schumacher lost a barge board about early stages of the race? And well, he lost both of them, didn't he?
Both of them, didn't he? When he had a little trip across the grass and damaged the stays on them, damaged the support. So the two leaders then coming up. This will give Michael Schumacher a bit of a wry grin, won't it? Coming up to lap Kimi Raikkonen. Raikkonen, with the blue flag situation, will just have to leap out of the way and say, after you, sir. This is the only option. There's a Minardi first, but Raikkonen lapping down in the 18s now. There's a Minardi just gone past and pitting. That'll be Wilson for what should be a scheduled stop. And look, this is Ralph then. The Minardi's between him and Michael at this stage. Next in line then is 9th place man Kimi Raikkonen to be lapped.
There's Wilson taking on the fuel. Raikkonen running wide at the hairpin to allow the two race leaders through. Ralf Schumacher doesn't seem to have got a very good drive out of the hairpin. He's lost quite a bit of time there to Michael Schumacher. Somehow it's going through the traffic there. Raikkonen pulls over to the left to allow Ralf Schumacher to through, and it's a hard knock for Kimi Raikkonen here this afternoon. He got himself up starting from the pit lane with a full tank of fuel. He got himself up as high as 5th place. Then he had that puncture and that tyre problem. It's dropped him down to 9th place.
And he just got passed by the Minardi coming out of the last corner. Raikkonen, I was going to say, you were talking at the time, Joe, he was so polite coming down that straight. He pulled over to the right, picked up all the rubbish off the racetrack, and when he got to the chicane, he could do nothing about it. This is 3rd place man Montoya. He was then 7.8 seconds adrift to the leaders. He's still got a chance of catching the Schumacher battle.
He's made his stop. We haven't had a safety car here. I mentioned at the top we've had 6 safety cars in the last 7 years here in Montreal. Amazingly, 46 laps in, no safety car incident. Let's hope we don't have one. But certainly something like that is really probably the only hope, I think, for Juan Montoya now, unless these two come across some kind of unexpected problem or get tangled into each other. Montoya has tried valiantly to make up for his mistake at the start, where he had a spin coming through the final corner. The first couple of laps dropped him from 2nd down to 5th. He's managed to fight his way back up again. He's currently running 4th behind Fernando Alonso. You can see, is it the wing mirror? Yes, it is the wing mirror, just bashing, as it has been for some time, on the side pod of that Williams. As second place, Ralf Schumacher comes in the pits. This is lap 47. Ted, take us through it.
Okay, Ralf Schumacher comes down. Remember, Michael Schumacher fueled longer for this stint, so he can go on for another 4 laps. That's going to be critical in this fight. They're changing the rear tyres. They're not changing the front tyres, James, are they? No, those tyres will have been on for the entire race. That's incredible because he didn't change them in the first stops. I hope they don't explode like the Michelins on Raikkonen's did.
Yes, well, low tyre wear here on the front. As long as you're not blocking them under braking, they will serve you well through the Grand Prix. But I tell you what, it was a bit nip and tuck with the fuel nozzle coming out and the car moving away. But that's what they've got to do this afternoon if they're going to win this race and leapfrog past Michael Schumacher. But this traffic is very bad news for Ralf. Even though they've got to get out of the way with the blue flags, hopefully the marshals will spot that. They'll be getting instruction from Charlie Whiting and Herbie Blash up there in race control. Now the blue flags are waving. The Toyota has got to get out of the way fast. But it's crucial. Ralf again having a poor outlap then.
And he has again fallen behind, as you can see now on your screens, Fernando Alonso in the Renault. So Alonso up into second place, and he ran a much longer first stint than the Williams drivers. So a battle there for Ralf Schumacher if and when he catches it. Mark Webber from 5th place pitting. Coulthard then has been promoted. Webber's dropped back down to 7th. 8th place now. Kimi Raikkonen has got past Webber. Button has got past him as well. Mark Webber rejoins in 9th place, just outside the points. We haven't really talked, Martin, about Jenson Button today. Racing with a twinge in his back after that nasty shunt that he had at Monaco on the Saturday morning. Didn't race or qualify in Monaco. He was in a lot of pain yesterday for qualifying, but he's kept the car on the island, currently in a points-paying position in 8th place.
Yes, indeed. Webber's 9th, DeMatteis 10th, Panis 11th. And Heidfeld, Wilson, Verstappen. Pizzoni is still charging around in the back of the field, now 2 laps down. Ferrari then coming in shortly, and they're running together on the racetrack. And look, Ralph's really had a very bad run. In fact, don't know which Williams there was in the background, had a bad run through the traffic. Michael with a lot of clear space. Barrichello getting out of the way. He's on a different race strategy, and Michael straight into the pit lane, but they can't afford to give away even half a second. Barrichello carrying on through the chicane, and the race leader in then. This is a crucial time, the last stop of the afternoon for a Schumacher brother.
Well, I told you it took 25 seconds to make a pit stop here in Montreal. That is exactly the margin. 25.2 seconds it was. Let's see who comes out on top then. Let's hope it's all tidy for Ferrari. It's a longish stop, bit of waving, bit of hand gesticulation. Where is the Renault? The Williams, there it is. Ralf Schumacher comes hammering down to turn 1. Michael Schumacher's got the straight run though into 1. It's not even going to be side by side this time. And Ferrari have done it again. Michael Schumacher has rejoined in the lead of this Grand Prix, to the enormous frustration once again of Ralf Schumacher. But when it counted on the in-laps and the out-laps of the 2 pit stop, Ralf Schumacher simply couldn't do enough. And we've got someone blown up on the main straight. Huge amounts of blue smoke on the run down the main straight across the start-finish line. And it's another Petronas Ferrari engine that's let go.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of those this year, haven't we? They didn't blow up much last year when they were in the back of the Ferrari, so something's wrong with the installation or the way that they're using those engines. Heidfeld out of the race then. He was stunning in the rain here, but not too spectacular in the dry. The yellow flags are waving. Ted is in the pits.
Yes, David Coulthard's been all over the place with his lap times. We're not quite sure what the problem is. It could be a gearbox, could be engine, but whatever it is, I'm afraid to tell you, it's terminal. They've cleared the garage. They're going to retire David Coulthard within the next lap.
Yeah, Coulthard, you're absolutely right, Ted. Here he comes into the pit lane, just throwing the tear off away from his helmet. Coulthard looks like he's going to be retiring from this Grand Prix. Kimi Raikkonen has gone past him up into 6th place now. He's closing down Rubens Barrichello. Raikkonen 8 seconds behind the Ferrari driver. And, well, more misfortune for Coulthard. This championship is just not going his way.
No, I suspect it's not brakes. We'll have to wait and see. But if it is brakes, they shouldn't have put him in the garage, really, because they're going to catch fire. So I suspect it's engine or gearbox related. We'll have to wait and see. That's, of course, if they will actually tell us. Alonso leads the Grand Prix then for the 2nd time this afternoon, because he's yet to make his stop. He keeps stretching these tanks of fuel out rather nicely, and he's looking pretty good for a P4 this afternoon. Montoya now 5.7 seconds behind the two Schumacher brothers, so he is going to come into play towards the end of this Grand Prix.
Definitely.
Hearing a lot more about him into the future of Grand Prix racing, solid performances, all types of racetracks, and now Montoya is just 3.8 seconds adrift as we've got another mirror hanging off the side of a Williams. So it's left-hand mirror for Ralph, right-hand mirror for Montoya. Alonso leads the Grand Prix, but will be stopping shortly. We'll be back.
So, it's been a little bit yo-yo for one or two drivers here this afternoon. Montoya's been up, he's been down, he's now around, he's fourth. Raikkonen has been up and down, started very much down. He's now fought his way back into sixth place, but what might he have done if he hadn't had that puncture, I wonder? Certainly could have been, well, ahead of Rubens Barrichello, he would have been fighting possibly with Fernando Alonso. Jenson Button has been in the points, but he's dropped out of them now. He's in 10th place and pitting, so he should rejoin, though, comfortably ahead of Justin Wilson, who's currently 11th for the Minardi team. And Verstappen and Pizzoni are both 2 laps down. Didn't really see any particular problems for either of them. Pizzoni's pace isn't particularly spectacular. 1:21.1. Teammate Webber doing 19.4s. Not a great day for Pizzoni, really, again.
It's not indeed. He's not really covered himself in glory, has he, with his Jaguar career, his Grand Prix career, which is really odd because Williams rated him so highly. So often I heard the don't tell anybody, but he seems as if he's as good, if not better, than Ralph and Montoya. And that certainly hasn't proved to be true out on the racetrack in the 2 hours we have on a Sunday afternoon where it all really matters.
Out of the race from the looks of things. Second VAR retirement. We saw him coming into the pits a few moments ago, and whatever it was is terminal. Hopefully it's not him. He did have a bit of a back problem, and Pizzoni coming in for his third stop of the afternoon. Look at the brake dust. To go here in Montreal. Fernando Alonso leads for Renault. He's 10 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher, with Ralf Schumacher third. Alonso comes into the pit lane as if on cue as we follow him. This will drop him back down into fourth place. So Michael Schumacher will lead. Ralf Schumacher will be second. Juan Montoya will be third. And get this, Montoya has closed the gap down now to just 2.8 seconds on the race leader as Alonso makes his stop. Looks pretty routine, very tidy. Renault very good at pit stops. Look at that, 6.6. That's one of the quickest we've seen for a long time. So Alonso should slot back in, as he does, in front of Rubens Barrichello by quite a long way. Raikkonen is closing down on Barrichello in the battle for fifth place. Raikkonen's had a very eventful afternoon, started from the pit lane, got as high as fifth, had a puncture drop to 10th. He's fought his way back up into sixth place. Webber's still 7th and De Matter is still 8th.
Crucially for Alonso, he just cleared that traffic because he was really flying before his pit stop, brought himself up, certainly with a chance of looking at the back of Montoya. But we're with DC in the pits.
Right, David, engine or perhaps gearbox we suspected. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it was gearbox. I lost fourth and fifth first of all, and it was okay to keep driving whilst I was in the points, but then I lost 7th gear, so then it's very difficult to drive like that.
How frustrating was today for you, both the race and what the result does for your championship hopes?
It's obviously not good. The actual race itself was encouraging because the pace was pretty good relative to those that I was around, and when I was running in clean air, good relative to the front runners as well. So again, it shows that we have the pace, but we just need obviously a better position in quality and reliability.
Bad luck.
That'll be galling for McLaren because they're keeping using the 17, the MP17, because they don't want to risk the reliability on the new, very, very new 18 at the moment. But the one thing they would have expected here is reliability. So bad news there, they lost 3 gears, it seems like. So Michael Schumacher half second ahead of Ralf Schumacher, then Montoya just 2.4, and we've got him in the picture now. And I tell you what, Alonso's not very far behind them either, considering the pace he was putting in before his pit stop. And if I was the Williams team manager, if Montoya cruises up to the back of these two, I'd be saying to Ralf, OK, let him through, let him have a go. You've not been able to do it so far in, we're on lap 57 at the moment. Let Montoya have a go at Michael, and if it doesn't work, we'll put you back in front of him again.
Well, that's good thinking, because certainly Michael Schumacher got in front of Ralf Schumacher on lap 21 when he made his first pit stop. And really, as you say, this is now 57 laps into the race. Ralf hasn't even had a go at him. He's followed him really around. Certainly looking at the pace Montoya's had in the car, and the Williams is the slightly faster package here this afternoon. So there is a chance possibly. And Montoya, with all that aggression, really getting right over to Michael Schumacher. He's put big moves on him in the past, but of course asking Ralf to move over and let Montoya through is one thing, achieving that is quite another. And we have had instances, particularly at Silverstone a couple of years ago, where Ralf just frankly said, no, I'm not going to do it, sorry. Team order's not really a part of the game at Williams, but today you do get the feeling they've got the quicker package. They'd love to go away with from here with a win.
Yeah, Montoya's got the quickest car. He would have won this race without the spin, because I think he would have had the pace to leapfrog the pair that's in front of him in the pit stop somewhere. But if he can get up behind them, I mean, OK, he might be construed as team orders, but the brake's still blowing there through turn 8. And they're not, again, the regulation says you can't do that, but regulations are there to be broken, as we all know. And I don't really believe that is team orders in terms of affecting the World Championship. It's just team play, really. That's how I would definitely work this, providing Montoya can get there. 13 laps to go, including this one.
Well, I've been telling you all through the race about the progress of Kimi Raikkonen, and I was saying that he was closing out Rubens Barrichello. A couple of laps ago, it was 8 seconds the margin. It's now down to 2.4. So we've got 2 massive scraps developing on the racetrack. The first one is for the late race lead and the win between Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher and Juan Montoya. There they are, front 3 all together, down in 5th place. Huge scrap going on, or about to start, between Rubens Barrichello and Kimi Raikkonen. So what an eventful Canadian Grand Prix once again, as we ride on board with the Ferrari.
Montoya was 9/10ths faster than his teammate on the previous lap, and that's why the gap is down to just over a second. You're leading the Grand Prix on the edge of your seat. You're heading down towards turn 8. It's a bit of a tunnel. It's a very wide bridge. Gives you the effect of being a small tunnel under there. It's bumpy. And in that shadow there, always just catches you out as you hit the brake pedal. Now you're P3, and you're looking at the 2 leaders, the 2 Schumacher brothers, and that's all you've got to do is get past those 2 little dots to win this Grand Prix this afternoon. And he's just hooking nicely up to the back of them, isn't he?
Well, on his way over here, Montoya stopped off at Indianapolis and swapped cars with the great NASCAR champion Jeff Gordon, Californian driver who started out his career in single-seaters. They swapped cars, and Montoya was pretty quick in the NASCAR, but he was amazed how far before the corner he had to brake in the big truck, which is a NASCAR sports car. And he was also amazed by the performance of Jeff Gordon, who was only a second slower than Montoya around Indianapolis road course in last year's Williams. When asked to put it in perspective, Montoya said, well, I think you could say that there's a lot of kids on the fringes of Formula 1 and Formula 3000 and other series who couldn't have done what Gordon did there. That was a stunning performance. Nice bit of PR as well for both teams. Louise.
Down in the pit lane with Jenson Button, who's just had to park his BAR. What was the problem?
I don't know exactly, but I lost gears. First of all, I lost 4th gear, then 5th and 6th, and then 7th gear. So there was no use going round in 3rd gear, really.
How was your race up until then?
The first stint was a little bit hard because we were stuck in traffic, but yeah, it wasn't too bad. The car wasn't handling like I'd like it to. We had a huge amount of understeer in the low-speed corners, which is losing me a lot of time coming onto the straight, so it was impossible to pass anyone. But yeah, that's it really.
Cheers.
The reason they have a lot of transmission problems around here is they launch across the curbs and come back down to earth on full throttle with plenty of traction control. There's a tremendous strain through the transmission.
So, as we enter the final stages of the Canadian Grand Prix, it's all closing up nicely. Ralf Schumacher is right behind Michael Schumacher. Juan Montoya is closing them down. It's going to be a grandstand finish here. You a little bit later on for your drive of the day. I don't want to know who it is now, but I'm going to put forward Fernando Alonso as a candidate. I mean, we haven't seen an awful lot of him, but he's led the race 3 times in a Renault, having qualified in 4th place. A lot of people thought he was running a light fuel load, but he is now pushing faster and harder, carrying the same amount of fuel as all the cars in front of him. He's now faster than all 3 of the front runners by well over a second in the Renault. This kid is increasingly impressive. It's a very, very, very good season for Fernando Alonso. Now then, Kimi Raikkonen, we're not seeing it, but he is 0.3 of a second behind Rubens Barrichello in the battle for 5th place. We're spoilt for choice. There it is. That's the scrap for 5th place. And Raikkonen, judging by the amount he's been able to close up Rubens Barrichello, let's remember that Rubens is missing one of his barge boards, the left-hand side front barge board, aerodynamic device. So he is a little bit of a wounded animal, but nevertheless, Raikkonen is ready to attack him.
The chronology of their lap times, and look, Raikkonen supremely consistent on 1:17.2s, 3 consecutive laps, and that's why he's just edged up nicely to the gearbox of the Ferrari of Rubens Barrichello. They're fighting over 5th and 6th. Barrichello had a pit stop for a new front wing. Raikkonen, of course, started from the pit lane after a refuel.
Huge crowd down there at the hairpin, as always here in Montreal. That's a terrific place to watch Grand Prix racing. That's where Nigel Mansell switched his engine off a few years ago, back in 1991, whilst almost in sight of the checkered flag. And it's a place where you can see a Grand Prix car going from well over 185 miles an hour down to about 60 in just a matter of meters. 62 of this 70-lap Canadian Grand Prix. James Allen and Martin Brundle with you. Well, I hope you're sitting on the edge of your seats, because we're in for a really close finish. At the front, Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher and Juan Montoya are separated by less than a second, the top 3. You're looking at the battle for 5th place between Rubens Barrichello and Kimi Raikkonen. And Raikkonen has closed right up onto the back of Barrichello in the last few laps, and you can't help but think he's going to attack him. 8 to go here on the Ile de Notre Dame circuit, and Barrichello, remind you, has got a damaged car. He's lost one of the barge boards, aerodynamic devices on this car, so Raikkonen may well feel he's there for the taking.
Yes, and more than that even, the track is coming to the Michelins now, as the rubber's going down. We've got Michael Schumacher really under pressure from Ralf and Montoya, and Alonso's creeping up on the back of them, and comfortably the fastest man on the racetrack. Young Fernando Alonso, P4, but only 4.1 seconds off the lead. And of course, I think that's also then helping Raikkonen really put Barrichello under pressure. Raikkonen started from the pit lane. Barrichello stopped for an unscheduled change of front wing. Ted.
I've just been into the Williams garage, Martin. There have been no instructions on the radio to Montoya or to Ralf Schumacher about how they might play this with Michael. The engineers have been keeping Juan Pablo informed about the gaps to Michael and to Ralf, but I think their attitude is these guys are big boys, let them fight it out by themselves. By the way, he's had a race-long downshift problem. That's what they think contributed to that spin at the beginning.
Would surprise me, because he spun in the middle of a corner. It looked like he came off the curbs unless he dropped it on the way in. But it didn't slow him down too much, because he's now caught them back up anyway. And look at that, 1, 2, 3 in a line. And there then is the Minardi of Wilson. Well, it'd be a shame if he drops out. It'd be all 4 Brits out of the race. Justin Wilson was running 11th. Coulthard out, mechanical problems. Button out, mechanical problems, as was Furman. And it is confirmed down there, Justin Wilson sadly out of the race after a great drive. He was 15 seconds ahead of Verstappen at one point.
Yeah, he certainly was. He was in the top 10. Justin Wilson having started 18th on the grid. It was a lively start to the race. Ralf Schumacher from pole, Montoya alongside him. but Rubens Barrichello had some front wing damage. Pizzonia had a bit of an incident. Then Montoya spun at the chicane on lap 2, dropped him down into 5th place, and that's what's really cost him the win, as Martin was saying a few moments ago. Both Williams' trailing wings. Ralph's trailing his left-hand side wing. Montoya's trailing the right-hand side wing. We've had Trulli had many incidents. David Coulthard as well. He featured in the race, crawling up through the field after a poor qualifying performance. But the McLaren strategy today was very strong, put both its cars into good positions. Raikkonen starting from the pit lane got as high as 5th place. He then had a puncture, and that cost him any chance of getting 4th or better today. He's currently in 6th place, trying to pinch that place, 5th place off Rubens Barrichello. We've had a couple of tyres delaminate. We've had 1 or 2 spins. We've had all sorts of incidents. Just 12 cars, 11 cars, I should say, still running on the racetrack.
I'd love to see Alonso getting amongst this lot. They're cruising around now. They're not really having a go. Not as hard as I thought they would be. And as you say, those mirrors that are trailing off the Williams, Michael's got it under control at the front. And look, little Alonso just perusing up behind him, taking chunks out of them every lap. What can he do now? He's got the fair. He doesn't have the straight line speed to do anything, but he's certainly got the lap speed to worry the one mirror that's left on Montoya's car in the right position.
In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. It's never truer than the Williams team, I think. Just one mirror to look out of. It's a fantastic spectacle. Looking out of the window here, the top 4 all flashing down the pit straight all together. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like a Formula Ford race entering the closing stages. Who's going to have a go? Who's going to attack the car in front? As Martin says, the Renault is the one with the least straight line speed. Fernando Alonso at the tail there. He's giving away about 10, 12 miles an hour down the big long straight to the cars in front of him. He's going to have to do it on sneaky, isn't he? He's going to have to do it somewhere under braking. Just put his car in a position that says, I'm coming through. What are you going to do about it? Certainly he and Montoya, 2 of the most aggressive racing drivers in Formula 1 at the moment.
Then with all 6, DeMatta's Toyota pulling out of the Grand Prix. DeMatta was running 8th, so he was in a points-paying position there. Luckily for that team, Panis was 9th, so he'll move into that point-scoring position.
Well, it's good news for Toyota. They're going to hopefully get to go away from here with something. I'm going to tell you what, if there's any problems with any of the front runners, you're going to have Verstappen in a Minardi getting a point here, because he's currently in 9th place, Jos Verstappen. So it's not over yet. Still got a few laps to go. Anything could happen here at Montreal. And if any of these 4 get amongst each other, who knows what might happen.
Come on, somebody, have a go. Alonso shaping up on the back of Montoya there, but nowhere near close enough to have a go. But he's certainly close enough to worry him. And unfortunately, Montoya's just hunted them down. Now he's got there and he got into the turbulent air. He can't do anything with it. In fact, what I was saying, you know, maybe they should have released him and let him have a go at the back of Michael, because it's too easy for Michael at the moment.
Yeah, pressure is the key. Michael's been soaking it up, really, ever since lap 21, when he took the lead of this Grand Prix after basically trailing his brother Ralph for the first 20 laps. Ralph made the first pit stop, but his in-lap for the pit stop and his out-lap from it was slower than his more experienced brother, who knows that he's won races in the past by being strong around the time of the pit stop. It wasn't just the mechanics who, in fact, on the Ferrari side, was slower in that stop than the Williams guys. It was what the drivers did that made the difference here today. And after the second stops, Michael still led the race. And at the moment, he is holding on to that position, looking as though he is going to leave here with the World Championship lead for the first time in the 2003 season. Kimi Raikkonen is set to get 3 points for 6th place at the moment, unless he can get past Barrichello and make that 4 points. But either way, it's going to be enough to hand the lead in the championship to Michael Schumacher. 3 to go. Nice onboard action, as we've had all afternoon from Montoya. Rear facing now, looking back to Alonso in 4th place. Now facing forward, that's Ralf Schumacher in front of us, Michael Schumacher in the lead. That's how close it is.
Yeah, so Michael just edging away now. As he said, Raikkonen's led this World Championship since back in Malaysia on the 23rd of March. Surely he's going to lose it this afternoon now. Michael just pulling 7/10 of a second out on the pack. And it's stalemate, isn't forget what you know. They can't suddenly forget all about how to make the aerodynamics good. It makes the cars supremely fast, makes them grip well. And they do take your breath away when you just see them coming towards you. And just see them turning into the corner, especially if you're live. And I hope you're buying your tickets for the British Grand Prix, because this championship is going to be oh so close all the way through the summer.
Yeah, and in fact, Silverstone was mentioned today by Ron Dennis, the team principal of McLaren, as being the race at which we're likely to see the debut now of the new McLaren MP418. It's been testing in the hands of the race drivers. It's still a little bit fragile, but the feedback, or the word on the street, is that it's a very, very quick car indeed. And certainly they can't come soon enough for the McLaren team. Today, they're only going to score points with one car, Kimi Raikkonen. They're going to lose the lead in both championships. And they need the new car to come on stream as quick as possible. Silverstone, still a time away, though. We've got Nürburgring and Magny-Cours between now and then. So Williams are coming to the fore, as you can see. They had the fastest car here this afternoon, but it's just the wiliness, really, the craftiness and the skill, I suppose, of Michael Schumacher that kept his car and engine and tyre package in front of the superior on the day, Williams.
Yes, I think overall Williams will go home second and third, front row of the grid. They'll think, not bad, but I'm sure Frank and Patrick, they're winners, and they will feel they could have won today's Grand Prix.
They're closer than ever as they go across the start-finish line. We've got a very slow car. It's the Pitsonia's Jaguar just coasting along the start-finish line. And this is lap 70. And it's hard to see how anything's going to happen here. Final lap of the Grand Prix. Anybody going to have a bit of a Formula Ford moment, do you think?
I don't know where it's going to happen. That's the problem. Unless Alonso gets a much better run out of turn 9, he looks the only one most likely to at the moment in terms of having a go. But I don't think he's got the straight line speed to do it, and Montoya's not exactly scared of going wheel to wheel either. The mechanics are rushing across the pit lane, I can see out of the window here, and it's going to be yet another victory for the great Michael Schumacher. This will be number 68 if he can get it to the end of this lap.
Just a few more corners to go then into the hairpin for the final time. The gigantic crowd standing up, applauding all four of these men who at various times have figured prominently in this Grand Prix. 3 of them have led it. Juan Montoya had a chance to win it, but he had the spin very early on, which dropped him from second place. Here's Alonso's last chance coming down the straight. He hasn't got the straight line speed, and through the chicane for the last time goes Michael Schumacher. He takes his 4th win of the season, his 6th victory here in Montreal, and it's really a Michael Schumacher day. You can see how much it means to him, because he knows he beat on the day a stronger car. As Martin said, his 68th Grand Prix victory, 49th for Ferrari. And for those of you who are statistically minded, we've got a very interesting thing in prospect now. He's just 1 point away from the magic 1,000 World Championship points in his career. And he's 1 win away from 50 with Ferrari. It's been a remarkable career for Michael Schumacher. It's still going strong. Here, though, is Rubens Barrichello, who seems to have dropped Kimi Raikkonen, who was right behind him at the end of the previous lap. Yeah, he's dropped back. He's a couple of seconds behind now in 6th place. So he loses his World Championship lead today to Michael Schumacher. And he will think as well about what might have been. He was fighting strongly before a puncture dropped him from 5th down to 10th. Rubens has struggled home in a car which is missing its barge board, as you can see on the left-hand side. But a terrific race, very, very close.
Well, a race with a lot of extraordinary events taking place. And it looked fantastic with 4 cars close together across the line, Neil, but really quite a few laps out. I'm with Martin Brundle. I didn't believe any of them were going to make a pass.
Well, it's very difficult. They'd be heavily brake limited at this point in the race, Billy, with a lot of temperature and a lot of wear. Tyres are at the end of their tether, and nobody wants to throw away a points-paying situation unless they're very confident that they can actually get by the preceding driver. But what an extraordinary win for Michael Schumacher. I said at the top of the show that he's got something special about the way in which he approaches this Canadian Grand Prix, producing his 6th win at this event, 68th career win. Can you believe that number in Formula One? And his 4th win this year, and it's 163 wins now in Grand Prix racing for Ferrari, and that man is justifiably proud. Great day for Bridgestone because they were swamped by Michelin on the grid at the start of this race, and they dug out. It was a fascinating start to the race, a real seesaw battle between Ralph and Michael. Ralph's car was showing a lot of signs of early race understeer. It was interesting that many of the Michelin runners, Billy, chose to leave their fronts on for a couple of stints there, and so in fact some of them actually ran right through the entire race with the same front tyres.
Well, James rightly paid credit to Michael's abilities, but I have to say that you've got to give credit to those guys right there in the red, the Ferrari crew, who got Michael out of the pits twice in front of Ralph. It was a close-run thing, but they did a great job.
That little battle at lap 46 was fantastic, and here's confirmation of the results, folks. Michael Schumacher for Bridgestone, Ralf Schumacher for Williams and Michelin, then Montoya, Alonso, Barrichello, Kimi Räikkönen probably got out of jail with that P6. What did the puncture cost him? Points for Mark Webber, that's terrific. Olivier Panis moves to 8th. How disappointing for Cristiano Di Marta in the points, not making it there at the very end. Verstappen, though, 9th. Tremendous performance from the Dutchman. And Cristiano, in fact, classified as having finished 11th, even though the car stopped on the circuit a couple of laps back.
Yes, well, this circuit's reputation as a car breaker is maintained with only 10 running at the finish, and we're looking now at the cars that did not make it across the finish line.
You see the extraordinary amount of carbon brake dust when they release the wheels off the hubs for those pit changes. It's astonishingly difficult and hard on brakes around this particular circuit. So this will tip the World Championship standings around. And Michael in the pit lane being congratulated by not only the Ferrari crew but all of the key members of the Formula One establishment for this incredible achievement.
Well, it's hard to see him being headed from here in the championship. We'll take a break from Montreal. When we come back, of course, we'll hear from the drivers and relive some of the great moments. We're back. Schumacher celebrating, and why not? Taking the championship lead for the first time. It's taken him half a season to do it, but an extraordinary situation. Before we say more about Michael, we will hear from him and see him on the podium. Both Jaguars classified in this race. Pitsonia, you might have noticed, was slowing down dramatically in the closing laps, but that's encouraging for them. It's only the second time this season they'll have classified both cars.
Yes, they got the cars home in Austria, and it looked as though they sort of all but got them home today. I'm not quite sure about Pitsonia right at the very end there, but Mark's certainly in position 7 and gaining some valuable points. Shocker of a day for Jordan, Sauber and BAR again. BAR qualified appallingly and their results just not there. Now here are the Constructors' Championship points, and it's business as usual for the red guys, and Ferrari back on top with 85. McLaren, Mercedes, tough day, 76. Williams, BMW with 64. So they're continuing to close that gap, and a pretty strong performance from Williams with Ralph in 2nd, Montoya in 3rd, Jean Todt there enjoying this 163rd victory for the Ferrari Formula One team. I'd love to have heard what Jacques Villeneuve said to Craig Pollock as they walked through the paddock there. Get me another job. Get me another team. And a 1st and a 5th today for Ferrari. Not a bad day for Renault, Toyota and Jaguar. Now some highlights here. And remarkably, particularly after the doom and gloom predictions from NC at the start of the race, they all got through the first corner, although you picked up something interesting here, Billy. Barrichello made contact with, I think it was Alonso in the second turn. And that's why that wing was that's right, damaged. And here's Montoya getting out of shape on the exit of the final corner at the end of the first lap. And I reckon that will turn out to have been a pretty costly mistake for him. And I think it was Martin who alluded to the fact that Frank Williams and Patrick Head may well rue that as a possible one that got away. Extraordinary pit work from Ferrari to place their man in front of his brother, and that I think was the strategic moment in the race, lap 46. And once you've got track position with these cars, indeed any closely matched racing cars, then you're a very hard man to break. And there's the toughest man to break, Michael Schumacher.
Who is Michael's race engineer.
Telling gesture of the head from Ralph there when the camera panned back and showed the two brothers. He was, I don't know who he was talking to. It might have been his girl down in the celebrations. I don't know, but he was sort of gesturing, and he's my brother, and how the heck do I beat him?
Well, it was I tried, but I couldn't get there in the end. It was a bit of a disconsolate look. Chris Dyer there, an Australian, Michael's engineer. When Michael leapt out of the car, those two embraced, and no doubt Chris's contribution to this victory is a big one, and he's being rewarded with the opportunity to be there on the podium.
Great save from Kimi Raikkonen. That delamination, the tyre puncture, whatever happened to that tyre.
Couldn't have happened at a better time if it was going to happen, because he was about 50 metres from the pit lane entry. So if you're going to have that sort of drama, best to have it there.
But starting in pit lane, getting some points, it's vital. That leaves Michael's lead only 3. But I don't know. Maybe when they trot out the new car, Kimi will still be in championship contention.
To get their hands on the mum champagne, which is going to fly! Champagne!
Ralph's first podium this season, but of course points in every race has been a feature of his championship.
Which is a tremendous record, Bill, in these cars. 100% reliability and finishing record is a critical thing if you're going to string together a championship, and that's one of the things that this team has done so well in the recent past. They've made fast cars that are reliable.
The first Schumacher 1-2 finish since Brazil last year, same order as well. Whoop. There's one bottle that won't make it back to the paddock. And it doesn't have much significance to this championship at all, but I find such things interesting in the early hours of the morning. Shuey now on 999 points. I think James pointed out he was just one short of the 1,000. Coincidentally, Valentino Rossi picked up his 1,000th point last weekend at Mugello. Now, given that they're of different ages and vastly different point-scoring systems, I found it quite a coincidence that those two great champions have reached their 1,000th Grand Prix point at around the same time.
You said it, Bill. I haven't got anything more I can contribute at this time of day. My brain's scrambled.
Yeah.
But it is a great achievement for both guys. And but what can you say about Michael? He's just signed that new contract, which extends through until the end of 2006, and you start looking at these figures, as I said before, and think about what might be in the coming years, and he will end up with some extraordinary figures against his name, as if he doesn't already have some.
Yeah, heads are down, I think, across the paddock, even though they ran pretty close at the finish there, and I think Rubens Barrichello also has not been as close to Michael in relative terms as we might have thought at this year when he was saying, you know, pretty strong things.
Yeah, he had a bit of a battle on his hands today because he lost some bits and pieces. Obviously had to come in early with that problem with the front wing, and then with the barge boards, that would certainly take some aero percentage away from the car and hurt his lap time. But you're right, he's not quite there at the moment.
Things just haven't been going right for him. We'll take one more break, then we'll come back, and don't forget, US Open coming up. We'll talk to Tim Webster pretty soon. Celebrations for Michael Schumacher and Ferrari in the Canadian Grand Prix. Who will celebrate victory in the US Open a little later this morning? That's a big question, and a very interesting one from Australian fans' points of view. Tim Webster, of course, will bring you that amazing final round very soon. Before we talk to the drivers, I'd like to talk to Tim about this, because Stephen Leaney is in with a chance of winning this championship. And Tim, it's been a long time since an Australian's been in a winning position in a major tournament.
Yeah, mate, it has. The last was Steve Elkington back in 1995, and before that Norman, and then Wayne Grady in 1990. You know, he's a terrific player, Billy. Johnny Miller has been giving his swing a rap for the last couple of days, says it's one of the best he'd ever seen. And we've always known that. And Stephen's won 4 times in Europe and is in contention. Mind you, he's 3 back of Jim Furyk. Furyk's at 10 under and Leaney's at 7 under. And that's a lot of strokes in a US Open, but this is when the pressure gets to blokes, Bill, in the final round. And I suppose it's been said of Stephen over the years that the pressure does get to him sometimes, and the club gets a bit tight in the hands, and and he starts to pull him and starts to push him. But, you know, they interviewed him yesterday, and gee, he looked nervous, Billy. And I hope he's been able to get a good night's sleep. We just saw a lovely shot of him and his wife Tracy walking hand in hand down to the practice fairway there. So, mate, yeah, he's in contention. The last Australian to win the US Open was David Graham back in 1981, so it's been a long, long time. And he can win it. I mean, he's got the golf game to win it, but whether he can get his head around it, I suppose, is the issue. We'll be on the air shortly, and Stephen tees off about 6 o'clock our time, Bill, and I'll be sitting here nervously watching with everybody else. I'm right in his corner, I'm sure we all are.
Thanks very much, Tim Webster. It's been a long morning, but it'll be easy to stay awake when we're riding with Stephen Leaney. A lot of history riding with him as well. We're ready to talk to the drivers here in Montreal, so time to find out just how satisfied Michael Schumacher is with this championship lead that he's just acquired.
And the winner for the 4th time this year, Scuderia Ferrari Marlboro's Michael Schumacher. Michael, 4.4 seconds covered the first 4 cars as they crossed the line. Pressure all the way, 2 great pit stops. Does it get much better than that?
No, I mean, that's the ideal result, obviously. It was a tight race, a tough race. We sort of had to be very careful on our brake side, so I wasn't able to push all the way through and just drove the pace I needed to. And during the pit stop area, that's the area I started to sort of open the gap a little bit. Basically, it was a very, tricky and tight race, as what you said, the first 4 cars so close together.
I know you're not into stats, but you've just scored 999 World Championship points now, and, of course, you've taken the lead in the World Championship.
Well, that's a good number. In Germany, that means if you achieve a number like that, you have to give a drink free to everyone. So let's see what we're going to do tonight.
Ralph, great race there with your brother in the early stages. Pit stops decided it for you?
Yeah, strategy, we were lapped down on them. Obviously, a bit disappointing because we had a bit of race pace. I can't see where he took the gap, but anyway, maybe it was a different race, but I was always able to follow him. And with clear road, I could have gone quicker, as cars behind us showed on Michelin tires. I think we simply had a bit of tire today, as we had last year. But, you know, in 2001, I won it like this. Now it's his turn, so why not?
In the amazing mirrorless Williams, too, and an interesting tire choice in the second pit stop there.
Had my reasons for it, because we had a bit of graining and I just didn't want to go through the period again. Made my race a bit difficult in the beginning. Mirror was kind of tricky because I was on this camera and hitting my head, breaking into turn 1 sometimes, so it was a bit scary.
Juan Pablo, you were looking very good and, of course, had that very early lap spin, early race spin right in front of Michael.
Well, yeah, I was too close to Ralph when I braked, and, you know, you got very little downforce here, and I just braked too late and got it sideways, and, you know, acquired in the race. I missed the chicane quite a few times. You know, I couldn't brake where I wanted to brake, and every time I braked where it was, I was hardly making the chicane, and I just went in sideways and just lost it. It's my fault completely, but, you know, I think it's great that everybody at BMW and Williams did a fantastic job for me. You know, gave me a good car, and, you know, managed to come back. You know, I dropped to like 6 and came back to 3rd, so it's pretty good.
Looked as if that problem that you also had with the mirror didn't slow you at all.
No, it was bothering me quite a bit, especially, you know, when it was getting inside the cockpit. It's like my hand is like, what's this, you know, and sometimes it would be flopping in front of my face, but pretty interesting.
Well, at least you didn't have to look at Fernando Alonso behind you in those closing laps.
Yeah, I saw, they told me Fernando's within 2 seconds. I said, oh. Then I saw, but I knew when I passed him, they had way too much downforce, and you know, there was no chance they're going to pass us in the straight.
Michael, you said yesterday, wait and see what happens on Sunday. Interesting, in fact, that you had virtually the same fuel load as the Williams drivers.
Yeah, virtually, but just this little bit more, which gave us the race, which made us winning, and that's what it in the end takes. Whether, it doesn't matter. The end is that we were good enough, and we were actually very good on the start as well. I was a bit worried for the start after what I've seen in Monaco. But start went very well, and I just was able to stay close and do the right speed in the right moment to give us the lead. And then the crew, the mechanics, did a great job on the pit stop to get me out in front.
Now we can have a few words from you in your own languages, starting with Mike.
Yes, well, while the Williams drivers go searching for the bloke who puts the mirrors on, we'll talk about Alonso. Not a bad run.
Great run for him. It was the 7th event in 8 races where he scored points and also scored the fastest lap today, so he continues to be very, very impressive. It was interesting just listening to Ralph there, and he confirmed what our observations were here, that the car was understeery and the tyres were graining early in that stint. When Michael was putting the pressure on the early laps, you could really see that Ralph was having trouble hitting the spot. But many of the Michelin runners ending up with an unusual combination today of new rears and slightly worn fronts, and they were weathering the storm better in that configuration. The other thing that I thought was interesting just before we go, Billy, is that when you study the points situation now, we've got quite an interesting battle, because Williams have continued to close the gap, and the Constructors' Championship now is really starting to heat up. Obviously Ferrari have gone to the top, but Williams are getting into there, so it's a real three-way battle.
Do you think there was any pressure from BMW on Williams, or is that just beat up in the media to give us a story?
There is always pressure on everybody in motor racing at a professional level in every direction, team to driver, driver to sponsor, all the suppliers and so on. So no, I mean, there's obviously still some glitches in that deal. They've not yet put together and consummated that contract between Williams and BMW going forward, but they're working on it. I don't really know what all the details are, and obviously, unless you're actually deeply involved, you wouldn't know. The other thing quickly is that obviously the battle for first is very tight, but the battle for third is sensational, with Alonso, Ralf Schumacher, Barrichello and Montoya all split by just 3 points, so that'll be one to watch when we go to Europe in a couple of weeks.
Great contest. One slip up from Michael, and once again the whole thing just concertinas. And yes, on that subject there was quite a bit of writing in the media and various places about BMW putting pressure on Williams to finally harness adequately that enormous power that the engine has. They seem to be achieving that. Let's look ahead on your home of motorsport and your home of golf as well. Just reminding you, the US Open's not far away now. RPM next week, Sunday, June 22. Check your guides for times, but as usual, 1:30 to 2:30. The Champ Cars, we mentioned earlier in the day, or yesterday now, about how busy it's going to be in this series. Portland is the next stop, and it's next weekend. Formula One continues in Europe, back to Europe across the Atlantic, round 9. And that'll be 10:30. Check your guides once again for details, and stay with us, please, because the US Open final round will be something special. Tim Webster will bring you all the action. But from the motorsport crew, including Neil Crompton and myself, we're going to get some sleep. Bye for now.
His 6th victory here in Montreal, and it's really a Michael Schumacher day.
This program proudly brought to you by Vodafone, proud sponsors of the Scuderia Ferrari Formula One team. Michelin, discover a new driving experience. And Shannon's, special insurance for special vehicles.